Chapter 1155. Roland naturally knew what the Pearl of the Northern region was referring to. The development of the god's punishment bullet had encountered many technical problems, such as the caliber of the bullet and the gun. Since the hardness of the god's stone was related to its size, it was necessary to enlarge it as much as possible. However, a larger god's stone would also produce a larger anti-magic field, and the weight of a large caliber gun would inevitably have a negative impact on concealment, transportation, and usage. Over the past week, Anna, Agatha, Lucia, and Andrea worked together to solve the problem. After nearly 100 tests, they finally confirmed the data. To ensure a uniform force during firing, the god's stone of retaliation was processed into a cylinder with a width of 30 millimeters, and the outside was covered with a copper coat to form a sharp bullet. Therefore, the caliber of the bullet specially made for the Magic Slayer was an astonishing 35 millimeters, which felt like a small, heavy cannonball in one's hand. It was only at this size that the strength of the inner core was stable enough to not be shattered by the impact of the gunpowder. The lightless black hole produced by the god's stone was about 1.5 meters long, which meant that the gun itself had to be more than 2 meters long. Including the gun barrel, it was definitely outshone the rest. It was impossible to fit into the magic arc normally, so a disassembled design was necessary. At the same time, the increased caliber brought about a huge recoil, which made it impossible to use manual support like before. It had to be installed on a special stand to fire. Due to the above reasons, the final product looked extremely deformed. The shooter could not even reach the bolt, nor could he load the gun with his own strength. The weight of the entire gun in combat mode was almost equal to that of 2 adults, which indirectly reduced the number of people in the special task force. In addition, even with the muzzle brake and the gun frame as a buffer, the recoil could still injure the shooter. Fortunately, this new weapon was only intended to be used once, so it was not an unacceptable disadvantage. There were also benefits to the large caliber. The most obvious was the greatly improved range of the weapon. The effective range of a gun generally referred to the effective range. Bullets would still be lethal beyond this range, but because the trajectory was too erratic, it was impossible to determine the landing point. So it was worthless in actual combat. But for Andrea, the maximum range of a gun was the effective range. As long as the coin existed, she would be able to hit the target. This increased the theoretical range of the new weapon to more than 10 kilometers. Roland was beginning to understand why Edith had chosen the jungle. Compared to the anti-demon sniper rifle that Ashes could set up and fire, this weapon that could be called a cannon had to be assembled before it could be used, which greatly increased the preparation time. If they did not choose a secluded area, the risk of the plan would increase greatly. The last one is the retreat route. Edith pointed at the map and said, "After the artillery attack on the Tequila, the First Army will send a unit to the left flank about 5 to 6 kilometers ahead to support the retreat of the Special Operations Group. As for when the ambush would begin, it would depend on the strength of the enemy's resistance. That is the gist of the plan." This plan, which had been discussed for nearly a week, was quickly approved by everyone. After some screening, the members of the 2 teams were also confirmed. The sniper team consisted of 5 people: Sylvie, Andrea, Camilla, Maggie, and Ashes. The first 4 could be said to be essential for the ambush, and the last protector was Ashes, who had the most balanced ability. The accompanying scout was Lightning. Compared to Maggie, her biggest advantage was that she could transport God's punishment bullets. As long as she was hung by a rope, the effect of the God's stone would not affect her. Otherwise, they would have to walk to the enemy's rear. The Seagull team consisted of 10 people, and the scout was Maggie. Except for Tilly and Vendi, the rest were God's punishment witches, led by Zoe. The team was smaller than expected, because the large caliber shotguns, anti-demon grenades, and armor took up too much of the load. And this was under the condition that Hummingbird had half the weight. As for the frontal battlefield, there was not much to say. They just had to fight steadily and advance step by step. The whole plan made full use of all available resources, but it also made Roland feel the lack of transportation capacity. Without the support of inland rivers and railways, the First Army could only send a limited number of troops. If he had an armored unit, he would not have to go through so much trouble. He could have taken a detour, cut off the enemy's supply, and then launched a pincer attack with the main force. Even if the magic slayer wanted to escape, he would be trapped on the grassland due to the lack of red mist. At the end of the meeting, Edith stood up again. She looked at Roland and seemed to be hesitating. "Is there anything else?" Roland asked, raising his eyebrows. "When the battle begins, I hope you can temporarily enter the third border city and the city hall." Edith paused for a moment. "And of course the witches in the castle district." "What do you mean?" Bhairav, who had not been able to get a word in, finally found an opening. "Are you going to order His Majesty around?" Anna was a little moved. "Do you think the demons might attack Neverwinter?" "It's not very likely, but I can't rule it out." Edith looked much calmer after she spoke. The bloodline represents the upper limit, but it can't be roughly equated with the enemy's strength. For example, the red mist can support 3,000 demons in battle, but it can also support 1,000 demons to travel a longer distance. Since they've come here once, they can come again. If this time they don't come here to threaten or warn us, but directly to the castle district. If it's not an ordinary mad demon but a senior demon. There was a brief silence. "Even if we have to give up the tequila?" Agatha asked with a frown. "If it's inevitable that we'll lose, it's not about giving up. We'll just try to recover as much as possible." "I see." Roland smiled relaxedly. "Let's do as you say. Bhairav, you'll be in charge of the city hall. You know what to do, right?" Yes, Your Majesty." In fact, even if Edith did not mention it, Roland had planned to stay in the hall to watch the live broadcast. Although he could only see a corner of the tequila, it was still a rare opportunity. "Everyone, I know what you're thinking." Roland stood up. There was no doubt that after this meeting, those who had the mission would rush to the front line and participate in the decisive battle for survival. He knew that it was time for the final speech. "That's right. Victory is only one step away from us." Even though only a few people knew about this war, and even fewer knew its significance, there would be a day when it would be remembered by all of humanity. Before the Battle of Divine Will began, Greycastle had taken the initiative to attack and keep the demons out of the fertile plains. Regardless of whether the demons are held up by the Sky-Sea realm or not, the chances of victory will not be reduced. The only regret is that I can't go with you. The hall was silent, but everyone's eyes shone with a dazzling light. "Defeat the demons and take down the tequila. I look forward to your fight." Roland looked around and said word by word. Chapter 1156. 2 days later, the Seagull slowly landed on a simple landing field next to the forest terminal. As soon as Tilly got off the plane, she saw Ashes waiting for her at the side of the field. As usual, whenever the glider needed to land here, Ashes would always come to see her, even if it was only for a short time. Sometimes, Lin Sanjiu wondered if Ashes had completed the task of protecting Ashes that Roland had given her. "Don't worry. When I'm not around, Leaf will enter the state of Heart of Forest. No one can hurt her in this state. And every time, she is the one who notifies you of our arrival." And Ashes would always answer like this. "How long will you be here today?" Ashes asked when the crowd had dispersed and only the two of them were left. "Until tomorrow morning." Looking at the familiar smile in Ash's eyes, Tilly did not feel as relaxed as she had expected. After all, she had boasted in the meeting that, "I will persuade her myself," without any discussion, so she still felt a little guilty. "Iron Axe and Edith will be accompanying me. Operation Torch is coming to its last step, so there are probably a lot of things to be done here." One night, Ashes seemed to be calculating. "Then we can take a walk around the campsite. Leaf has planted a few experimental fruits, and they taste very good. In the evening, I will prepare a campfire and roast some game for you." Whenever she had time, she would always make arrangements like this, as if she did not want to waste a second. "Not this time. There are a lot of things to prepare tonight. I'm afraid I won't have time." Ashes suddenly seemed to be depressed. She sighed and said, "Okay. I understand." Tilly could not help but chuckle when she saw that the omnipotent extraordinary was in such a dejected mood. The anxiety in her heart also abruptly dissipated. "But I'm not the one who's busy. It's you." After all, we'll be staying together for the next few days. You have to prepare well. Me? Yes, in order to intercept the demons, the special task force needs your participation. So you have to pack your luggage tonight and set off for the front line tomorrow morning. Of course, take the seagull, she said with a smile. As for Leaf, Roland has also made arrangements. I will explain to her later. Ashes finally reacted. You could have told me this from the beginning. Tilly averted her gaze and ignored his protest. There's definitely not enough time to roast the game, but there should be no problem with trying some fruit. Do you want to take me there? Ashes immediately held out her hand. Of course. After dinner, when they returned to the camp, Tilly told her the battle plan made by the general staff. When it came to the sniping part, Ashes seemed to have already predicted her mission. But when it came to using the seagull as a backup, her expression suddenly became serious. Don't tell me that the person piloting the seagull is you. Tilly was silent for a moment and then looked into her eyes. I'm the most suitable candidate. But Roland promised me that he would take good care of you and never let you near the battlefield. Ashes stood up angrily. I have to confront him. He didn't agree. What? It's not Roland who agreed. Tilly took a deep breath. It's me. So, how do you think he will stop me? Tie me up or imprison me in the castle? Ashes was stunned for a moment. Of course, if it's a one-way trip, it's not impossible for him to do so. But as I said before, the seagull is just a backup. We will only intervene if Andrea can't finish the sniping. And all we have to do is to overtake the senior demon and release the god's punishment witches. Isn't that dangerous enough? You have to face the magic slayer. I knew you'd say that. Tilly interrupted helplessly. Did you think that we would keep pace with the enemy, overtake him, land right under his nose, and release the god's punishment witches? If not, what else can we do? Ashes frowned. The god's punishment witches can't fly. If we don't attract the enemy's attention and lure him into battle, this backup plan won't work at all. The most important part of luring the enemy was to show weakness so that the enemy would think that he could easily reap the victory. Otherwise, the magic slayer would only speed up his retreat, and placing himself as the bait was extremely risky. Fortunately, Edith isn't as simple-minded as you are. Tilly rolled her eyes. All the demons' actions are inseparable from the red mist, so we don't have to appear in front of them openly, nor do we have to use the seagull as bait. All we have to do is get rid of the enemy's supply team in advance. The magic slayer won't miss this opportunity. Otherwise, he won't be able to escape from this plane safely with only the gas tank he carries. In other words, the god's punishment witches are simply waiting for the magic slayer to exhaust himself and force him to fight. The time difference will be enough for Vendi and me to return to safety. Ashes could not think of a rebuttal. After a moment of hesitation, she said, But what if? Tilly shook her head. I'm not saying that this plan is absolutely safe, but it's risky. As I said, being the executor is part of the plan. Unless I'm as stupid as you, I won't put myself in danger. In fact, this is the main reason why I decided to come to the front. I can't rest easy if I don't keep an eye on you. Your Highness. Ashes was stunned. Say my name. T. However, before she could finish, Tilly had already grabbed her collar, pulled her down, stood on tiptoe, and kissed her on the lips. Ashes immediately felt a warm sensation. As far as she could remember, this was the first time that Princess Tilly had taken the initiative. After a while, Tilly pushed her away and slightly turned her head away. In the flickering candlelight, Ashes saw a slight blush on Tilly's face. Whether it was on Sleeping Island or in Neverwinter, every time you went on a long journey, I could only stay here and wait for you to come back. It could be a few days, or it could be a few months. But it wasn't like this in the beginning. When we were in the Old King's City, no matter where we went, we were together. Why did we have to be so careful now? Was there no risk at all when we were being hunted by the church? Tilly paused for a moment and looked back into Ashes's eyes. This time, she did not look away. I don't want to wait alone anymore. Through those gray eyes, the extraordinaire confirmed her will. I see. Ashes let out a long sigh. In terms of persistence, The 4 members of the Wimbledon family were somewhat similar. But I have a condition. Don't force yourself. You have to prioritize safety when you encounter demons, right? Roland has already said that. Really, I'm not a fool. I should be able to judge the situation properly. That's not what I want to say. Huh. Tilly was slightly stunned. One more time. That's my condition. Chapter 1157. The next day at Tower Station Number 9. The officers and decision-makers of the joint battlefront, who had been busy in Neverwinter for more than a week, finally returned to the frontline command center. However, this place could no longer be regarded as the real frontline. Agatha noticed that on the map, the front line of the railway had almost reached within 15 kilometers of the Tequila ruins, and the area within a 5-kilometer radius had been marked as a green safe zone. However, the area within 3 kilometers of the ruins had become bright red, which was obviously the most striking change in the past week. You're finally back. The Light of Dawn, Phil and Eltec, quickly walked up to them and saluted them with a standard military salute. The other members of the army and the General Staff Department also stood up and saluted with joy on their faces. Perhaps it was because they saw that their backbone had returned. Everyone had a look of relief in their eyes. Agatha was also a little relieved that her colleagues could still smile, which at least meant that the dangerous zone that had suddenly appeared did not threaten the entire Torch plan. Well done. It seems that everyone has been busy these days. Iron Axe nodded with satisfaction. He then walked up to the map and knocked on it. Philin, come and report the situation. Did the demons receive reinforcements? No, sir, the Light of Dawn replied. That trench was dug by the demons. Trench. Miss Sylvie was the first to discover the demons' movements. Some demons crawled out of the red mist and started digging 6 days ago. Miss Lightning confirmed the situation and noticed that there were demons moving in the trench, so she marked it as a dangerous zone. Iron Axe, Edith, and Agatha exchanged a look. Trench. We think so too. According to Lightning's drawing, although it looks very simple, its general layout is very similar to the trench in front of the First Army's position. The distance between the front and the back of the trench varies from 10 to dozens of meters, and there are many longitudinal trenches connecting them. Ferlin spread out a rather sloppy drawing in front of everyone and said, the biggest difference between us and the demons is that they use more longitudinal trenches to gradually retreat, and all of them are basically in the same line. The deviation is no more than 2 meters, so the whole thing looks more orderly. They're learning from humans. Agatha couldn't help but whisper. If the rumors before the first Battle of Divine Will were true, it meant that after nearly 1,000 years, the demons were once again imitating humans. Interesting. Edith pondered over the sketch and said, those trenches may not be used for retreat, but for attack. Yes, Iron Axe agreed. Hiding in the trenches can indeed reduce the chance of being hit by shrapnel, but they don't have any weapons that can fight against the Longsong cannons. A few trenches can't change the situation. Only by attacking the First Army's position can we hope to win. Is that why they built the longitudinal trench so close? Philin also quickly came to a realization. If they are all close together, they can indeed shorten the time of traveling. Then what should we do? Agatha asked. Nothing, the Pearl of the Northern Region sneered. When they dig into the firing range of the cannons, let the Black River open fire. It's a bit of a waste, but His Majesty has prepared enough ammunition for this battle. I'd like to see if they can dig their trenches to our front under the bombardment. Iron Axe looked at Philin and asked, how's the construction of the railway going? The demons' counterattack has become more intense, but they haven't caused much damage, Iron Axe reported. It's almost impossible for the mad demons to approach the First Army's position, so they rarely send out ground troops. Their main attacks are the devil beasts. But judging from the number of 10 to 15 devil beasts each time, I guess there are not many devil beasts left in the Tequila that can fly. If not for the senior demons, we could have killed more devil beasts. The Magic Slayer is out again? Agatha frowned. More than once. Philin nodded. Every time, the Magic Slayer would attract the anti-aircraft machine gun squad's fire, and the devil beasts would follow up and attack. His expression became solemn. But every time I see it, I feel like I'm fighting a real monster. How so? Edith asked curiously. The magic slayer usually plunges into the sky from the weakest point of the first army's defense. When it lands, it can stun people for a few seconds, even if the soldiers are wearing God's stones of retaliation. Philin said slowly. Without the protection of God's stones, for example, those workers who hide in the bunkers but can't control their curiosity will panic. The closer they are to the magic slayer, the more they will be affected. The devil beasts waiting in the clouds will take advantage of this opportunity to launch a surprise attack. Even though Sylvie would always inform the front lines in advance of every battle, it was still not an easy task to intercept a target that swooped down from above. Moreover, 1 or 2 hits would not be enough to cause fatal damage to it. Our best result so far is that we broke one of the magic slayer's arms when it landed. It seems that the magic slayer isn't so lucky sometimes, the Pearl of the Northern Region said with a smile. The problem is that when it reappeared a few days later, the broken arm would be as good as new, as if it had never been hit. Ferlin's smile was slightly bitter. If that's all there is to it, then it's fine. We have Miss Nana. Perhaps they also have some kind of special treatment, but what? Iron Axe asked in a low voice. Several platoons of soldiers reported to the general staff that the magic slayer's movements are getting more and more difficult to follow, as if it's getting used to this level of combat. In the past, one machine gun could block its movements and force it to change its direction, but now it takes 2 or 3 platoons to do that. If it weren't for the weapons and God's stones of retaliation invented by His Majesty, I guess it could kill all of us by itself. They did in the Union era, Agatha said through gritted teeth. And as long as it doesn't die, it can survive the next battle. As long as it doesn't die? Senior demons evolve through constant battles. The more heavily injured they are, the more powerful they will be when they come back. This is true both in terms of magic power and combat skills. Many extraordinaries died in their hands. Not only did they fail to overcome that obstacle, but they also helped them advance further. The Ice Witch closed her eyes. But not every demon can survive a serious injury. The only reason it can recover in such a short time is because of its own ability. You mean a senior demon that can curse and heal itself at the same time? Iron Axe's expression became serious. Chapter 1158. Agatha, Iron Axe, and Edith took the train to the front line to meet the needs of Neverwinter's battle plan. In order to meet the dual needs of firepower and material transportation, the double-track railway was divided into 4 branches, which were exactly the same as the station area. Although the increase in the amount of work slowed down the construction, the command headquarters knew that Tower Station Number 10, the terminus of the Torch Plan, would probably not appear in the final battle. If they waited until the fortress-like station was built, the demons would not be able to change the situation no matter what they did. The enemy's commander should be very clear about this. The Black River, which was made of steel, was extremely difficult to destroy. Even if the transportation was interrupted for 2 or 3 days, the humans could use the station to resupply until the railway was repaired. This made the usual tactic of cutting off the demons' retreat useless. Attacking the well-defended station under the front line of fire would undoubtedly be suicidal. The demons' only chance was to stop the First Army from advancing before Station Number 10 was built. In other words, there was no clear time for the decisive battle. It could break out at any time. Therefore, the bunkers, trenches, and bunkers on both sides of the railway were arranged according to the scene of the battle. In addition, Agatha noticed that the railway, which was originally facing the Holy City, was slightly deflected so that one side of the train was parallel to the Tequila. In His Majesty's words, this was the most suitable battle line for the carrier-mounted artillery. Standing at the end of the railway were 2 armored trains called Black River. They served as mobile fortresses. For groups of rotating machine gun turrets were ready to fire at demons who attempted to approach the position. The mobile 152mm Longsong cannon, mounted on the train, pointed to the sky, always aiming in the direction of the Tequila City. The Ice Witch climbed up the watchtower in the center of the camp step by step. The ruins, which were covered by a variety of lush plants, gradually appeared in her sight. Although she had long known this would happen, she still felt an indescribable shock and sorrow when she saw the ruins of her homeland. Although more than 400 years had passed, she could still see the shadow of the holy city in the ruins. "Were you born in that place?" Edith asked. Agatha nodded. Memories of the past rushed into her mind. "Congratulations. From today on, you're a member of the Union. As expected of the youngest High Awakened in history, the Quest Society welcomes you." "Sis, you're amazing. Do you know what you are doing? They are all warriors who have sacrificed their lives for the Union. They are only unconscious now, but you want to turn them into test subjects. It's not like you don't know how low the chances of recovering from a severe head injury are. Compared to dying like this, they must want to make a greater contribution to the experiment." "I can't accept it. This is an order personally signed by Lady Alice. If you can't accept it, then you can leave." "Master, the city wall has been breached. I'm afraid the Allied army won't be able to hold on for much longer. Let's go." "But my sister hasn't come back yet. She is a member of the garrison guards. It is impossible for her to leave the line of defense. If you die here, you will be letting her down. Take this opportunity to escape." "But, sir, where can we go after leaving Tequila?" "Don't give up. We still have hope. Climb over the mountains, cross the river, go to the barbarian land, to rebuild the order. Why do you insist until the end? If you escape now, you might be able to survive." "Although I don't have magic power, I understand many things. It is my duty to protect you. Your Majesty, she is awake." Images flashed by one after another, like a reincarnation. In the eyes of most witches in the Union, she was an anomaly. Although she was a genius, she was controversial because of her attitude towards mortals. Later, she was ostracized by the Quest Society because of the God's Punishment Army plan. She had no choice but to continue her research in the private experimental tower in the concealing forest. Even so, Agatha still had indelible feelings for Tequila. This city was once regarded as the last fortress of mankind. Countless heroic deeds had been born there. Thousands of witches and hundreds of thousands of ordinary people had fallen on the battlefield against the demons. Her sister was one of them. She still did not know which section of the collapsed city wall she was buried under. Escaping did not bring her a sense of relief. Instead, it became a heavy responsibility. Whenever she closed her eyes, she would hear the cries for help of countless people who had died in the battle. She was not a deserter. Every time she had a nightmare, Agatha would repeatedly tell herself that she lived for revenge, and to one day reclaim this land that belonged to mankind. She believed that the God's Punishment witches also had this belief and persevered to this day. Their lives no longer belonged to them. Among the ruins on the horizon, two towering giant skeletons could be faintly seen. They were the demon's new war weapons, and also the source of the nightmare. She looked at Iron Axe and said, "I have a request." "Go ahead." The Majins nodded. "If the First Army can successfully advance to within 10 kilometers of Tequila, I hope that the God's Punishment witches and I can fire the first round of shells. Only thunder and flame could end this nightmare. The roar of the cannons would inevitably raise the ruins of the holy city to the ground. The few remaining city ruins would also turn into ashes along with the skeletons of the people who had died in the battle, and become a part of the fertile plains. But Tequila would usher in a new life in the midst of destruction. 3 days later, in the evening, when the engineering team worked overtime to lay the railway about 12 kilometers away from Tequila, Sylvie was the first to notice the demons' unusual movements. A large number of mad demons crawled out of the ground corroded by the red mist under the feet of the giant skeletons, and rushed into the trench. Then 2 huge shadows appeared in front of the broken city wall, and slowly moved toward the position. She immediately realized that they were 2 enormous God stones of retaliation. Just like the God Stone of Retaliation pillars found in the Battle of North Slope Mountain, they were probably as large as some of the small original ores in the mine. The shadow covered an area of nearly 150 meters. More importantly, it completely blocked the Magic Eye's line of sight, causing the scene behind it to be completely hidden in the darkness. There were now 2 blind spots in the perfect circle of investigation. No matter what the demons wanted to do with the Godstones, it was already a desperate attempt for the demons of Tequila to mobilize thousands of mad demons at once. There was no doubt that this was a sign that a war was about to break out. Sylvie immediately picked up the phone to the underground command center. Chapter 1159. As the alarm went off, the front line immediately entered the highest state of emergency response. Quick, quick. Drop the tools in your hands and find the nearest shelter passage. The soldiers in charge of evacuation guided the construction team to evacuate the construction site. Don't push and don't look around. Remember, no matter what happens outside, don't leave the shelter. Shelter number 6 is full. We can't fit anyone in shelter number 7 either. Move back to the next shelter. Don't block the passage. Move. This was not the first time such a thing had happened. Although the soldiers were yelling and the atmosphere was quite tense, it did not lose order. Nearly 2,000 workers dispersed like a tide and entered one underground shelter after another along the preset evacuation passage. These temporary shelters, built by Lotus, were located behind the defensive line and were covered with steel plates. Not only could they allow passage, but they could also effectively resist spear attacks and machine gun fire. As long as the outer perimeter was not lost, hiding in it meant safety. After the crowd retreated, the originally brightly lit construction site was soon shrouded in darkness. The evacuation of the construction team is basically complete. The blackout is normal. The First Army is entering the position. Sylvie quickly looked around and conveyed the latest situation to the various units. At this moment, the observation room set up above the command center was the busiest place in the front line. More than 10 telephones on the long table rang one after another. The staff officers in charge of answering the calls sat around the table and would only inform Sylvie after confirming the importance of the message. On the other side, many staff officers summarized the information and fed it back to the SAN table or map to provide key information for the command center to make decisions. If Sylvie used to be the eye of the army, now the observation room with her as the center had become the information center of the entire army. As long as she was in charge, the operational efficiency of the First Army would be several times higher than usual. Yes, I got it. Miss Sylvie Vanner from the Artillery Battalion is calling. He hopes you can provide the enemy's position and test firing coordinates. Black River number 1 and number 2 also sent the same request. Let them wait a little longer. Sylvie glanced at the front line. The shadow was not advancing very fast. It was probably a little slower than walking. They had just entered the shooting range of 10 kilometers. According to their current speed, it would probably take them 5 to 6 hours to reach the front line. Therefore, the most urgent task was to find out the demons' intentions. What kind of tricks did they want to use the blind spots of the Godstone of Retaliation? When magic detection was ineffective, eyes were undoubtedly the most reliable method. She picked up the sigil of listening. Lightning Maggie, can you hear me? Where are you now? I just took off. Maggie is right above me. Not long after, the answer came from the other talisman. At the same time, there was a loud alarm. What happened? Have the demons launched an all-out attack on us? From the looks of it, it looks like it, but the enemy has interfered with the Magic Eye's observation. And the range is very large. I'm guessing it's the same as the last time, a large Godstone of Retaliation. Understood. I'll go take a look. Leave it to us, Ku. In contrast to the busy atmosphere in the observation room, in Lightning's eyes, the battlefield looked completely different. The flames under her feet were shrinking as if swallowed by the night sky. The land in the distance was pitch black, and it seemed deep and quiet. The fertile plains seemed to be in a deep sleep. There was no sign of an impending war. If not for Sylvie's warning, it would be hard to imagine that the demons were already charging at them. Maggie, turn on the night vision mode. Cuckoo. The white pigeon's feathers rapidly expanded and wrapped around its body. Then a huge head popped out of the feathers, its round eyes almost occupying the entire eye sockets. The owl's transformation is complete, Ku. Let's go. Lightning held the giant owl above her head with both hands and flew northeast. However, before they could get close to the tequila, Sylvie's urgent voice suddenly came from the sigil of listening. The investigation is cancelled. You two come back. The magic slayer is on the move. Lightning suddenly shivered, and even her limbs seemed to have stiffened. After trying to suppress the fear in her heart, she bit her lip and replied, "Even so, it shouldn't be that easy to find me. And, if I go back now, I won't be able to find out what the demon is hiding with the God's Stone, right? But, don't worry. It can't catch up with me with the Stone of Flight. I just need to avoid its large-scale magic suppression." Lightning clenched her fists. Although her palms were sweating, she did not want to run away like this. After more than half a year on the battlefield, she knew that she was not a brave person. Not only the gods' punishment witches, but even the conductor was much braver than she was. However, she was not alone. She had Maggie, Lorger, Joan, and many other companions to support her. They gave her the courage to start anew after facing her true self. She gradually regained her strength and began to investigate the demon again. After many hurdles, she finally arrived at the place where she had fallen half a year ago. There were only 2 hurdles left for her to overcome. She had to fly past the magic slayer and she would give him a heavy blow in return for hurting her. "Maggie, I'll leave him to you." Lightning unbuttoned her collar and forced the owl into her flight suit, leaving only its head exposed. She then accelerated to the speed of sound. She could fly at such a speed for only 10 kilometers. Be careful, the enemy is. They've noticed you." Sylvie's voice became intermittent, probably due to the influence of the magic resonance. Even without this warning, Lightning knew that she had been exposed. As long as the demon was not deaf, it would undoubtedly be able to hear the sonic boom. However, she moved faster than sound, which meant that when the demon heard the explosion, she had already flown over their heads. A few seconds later, Maggie's eagle eye found the target. "The monster is in front of you on the right, Ku." Under the hazy moonlight, Lightning had not yet found the magic slayer, but she already saw a circle of black light spreading out. Undoubtedly, the senior demon's low-light vision was better than Maggie's. Not only had the senior demon seen her, but it had also approached her flight path and activated the anti-magic field before she could stop it. In an instant, she raised her speed to the limit and changed from a horizontal flight to a dive. For a moment, Lightning even felt that the gloomy and cold black light had already grabbed her ankle. However, the illusion soon disappeared. In a breath's time, she had already left the black light far behind her. After breaking through the magic slayer's blockade, there was no longer any threat in front of her. She pulled herself up and flew across the demon's territory in a straight arc. She had a panoramic view of what was happening below. In the dim moonlight, Lightning saw 2 large god stones that had been cut into cylindrical shapes and were being pushed forward like rolling stones. The stone pillars were at least 20 meters long and nearly 3 meters high. At first glance, they looked like an upside-down clock tower. Behind each pillar were 7 or 8 spider demons. They squeezed together and crawled slowly, pushing the god stones of retaliation toward the first army. Chapter 1160. After passing through the encampment, Lightning once again ascended into the sky, and then stopped. "What's wrong, Ku?" Maggie asked, raising her head. Instead of replying, she turned around and looked in the direction of Tequila. In the darkness of the night, 200 meters was the limit of her vision. It was like looking for a needle in a haystack to find the magic slayer under such circumstances. But it did not matter that she could not see him. Lightning knew that the magic slayer could see her. From the direction of the Tequila, she should be facing away from the moon. As long as the magic slayer looked up, he would not be able to miss a shadow in the white moon. But he did not chase after her. The only reason was that the magic slayer had realized that she was too fast for him to catch up with. He gave up on the pointless attempt. She had won this round. Lightning took a deep breath and stretched out her right hand. Although her fingertips were still trembling, she plucked up her courage and stuck out her middle finger. That was the gesture that His Majesty had taught her, a symbol of victory. Then she turned around and flew back to her own camp without looking back. At the same time, she told Sylvie what she had seen. A regular cylinder made of God's Stone of Retaliation. "I see. Sylvie recorded the approximate size and handed it to Agatha. It was a basic skill for the senior members of the Quest Society to estimate the shape of the shadow and the position of the stone according to the volume of the god's stone. Soon, the corrected data was sent back to the observation room. Although there was a visual error, it was better than firing randomly. Sylvie used the Eye of Magic to determine the position and picked up the phone of the artillery battalion. After a while, the Longsong cannons exploded for the first time. Even though the flames that came out of the barrel were like fireflies that disappeared in a flash, they were still extremely eye-catching in the plains that were shrouded in darkness. When more cannons joined the attack, the light from the muzzles even faintly reflected the outline of the Longsong cannons. Sometimes, the flaming tail of the bullet would leave a short trail, as if it were a shooting star leaping from the earth. On the other side, the echoes of the explosions were endless. The fertile plains, which had been in a deep sleep, had finally been awakened. "So beautiful, Ku," Maggie murmured as she stared at the cannons that appeared and disappeared from time to time. Lightning stood against the wind and clenched her fists. Now there was only one last obstacle left. Osrook floated in the air, coldly looking at the mud pillars rising in front of his troops. This was the most threatening attack the humans had so far. As long as the projectiles landed in the middle of the army, they could instantly take the lives of more than 10 primal demons. Moreover, its power didn't need to be displayed through contact. Even if they were separated by several dozen meters, the metal shards shot out by the projectiles were enough to penetrate armor and tear flesh apart. Even it didn't have the confidence to block a direct hit. In his report to the Sky Lord, he named this weapon Fiery Rain. In addition, there were also fire crossbows that could continuously shoot bolts, fire sticks that could be carried by one person. All the current evolution of human beings undoubtedly came from the element of fire. Compared to the inheritance promotion that the Grand Lord thought, it was more inclined to be a kind of coincidence. In terms of the diversity of abilities, witches were better. If a suitable awakened appeared in the next few hundred years, coupled with the long-term study of fire, it was not impossible to achieve a great leap in power. However, even if human beings had embarked on a path that was completely different from theirs, it didn't mean that he was helpless. For example, the rolling stones made from the god's punishment origin showed that they were hard enough to resist the fiery rain. Osrook clearly saw that the god's stone was still intact after several direct hits and violent explosions. When the opponent's projectiles hit the edge of the stone pillars, they would even directly bounce off without leaving a hole. The real danger was the fiery rain that happened to pass the stone pillars and hit the tombstones. Their impenetrable armor was completely vulnerable in front of the fiery rain. Once they were hit, they would basically be torn into pieces. Ironically, the king had high hopes for these extremely tough symbiotic demons that neither felt pain nor fear. He believed that they were the most valuable breakthrough from the inheritance shard. Not only did they greatly enhance the supply ability of the frontline, but they also enriched the tribe's combat methods. Only 100 tombstones were needed to completely wipe out the human beings, which were lowly insects in the eyes of most of the tribe. Thus, the Grand Lord handed it exactly 100 tombstones, not too many and not too few. However, after more than half a year of fighting, not only were the humans not wiped out, but the Tequila tribe was already on the verge of collapse. Osrook could now still control less than 40% of the tombstones. If the Sky Lord didn't trust the king too much on this point, he wouldn't be in such a difficult situation now. If these symbiotic demons were all used up on the road, he could only let the primal demons fight them. That would be no different from suicide. The impact of the fiery rain on the god's stone of punishment pillars was not something the primal demons could withstand. Even the obsidian claws of the tombstones could be shaken off, let alone their bodies. But Osrook didn't care, because these sacrifices were all worth it, and the humans would pay for their sacrifice. 10 o'clock at night, in the underground command center. The battle had lasted for nearly 3 hours. Every 5 minutes, Iron Axe would hear the dull sound of cannon fire coming from above his head. At the same time, there would be sparse dust falling. Other than that, there was no other movement on the battlefield. It was as if the demons hadn't launched an attack, and the First Army had been firing at the air all along. This was completely different from the experience of previous battles. In order to save ammunition and protect the cannons, he had asked the artillery battalion to extend the firing interval and aim most of the firepower at the back of the Black Shadows. The problem was that even if such an attack caused real damage to the demons, the Magic Eye could not see the results of the battle. The only thing he could be sure of was that the 152mm Longsong cannons could not destroy the God's Stone of Punishment pillars. Although the dense bombardment could slow down the Black Shadows, they would eventually recover. Iron Axe had no idea how the spider demons managed to make such a big guy roll over the crater. Damn it! Iron Axe punched the table angrily. If it was daytime, these monsters wouldn't have survived until now. The biggest problem the First Army was facing was that no one knew where the cannonballs had landed. In order to hit the target, the cannons had to fire many times to find the correct landing point. However, when faced with two blind zones that were more than 150 meters wide and almost infinite in length, every shot was equivalent to a test shot without any feedback. According to Sylvie's observation, the Magic Slayer did not break into the camp. Instead, he was cruising above the Black Shadows, obviously on guard against lightning. Although lightning was faster than the enemy, flying at such a high speed consumed a lot of magic power. It was still possible to sneak in once or twice, but it was too dangerous for the Magic Slayer to stay above the Black Shadows, shake off the Magic Slayer, and at the same time, provide him with a landing point. Without any feedback, they would not be able to attack again. As a result, it would be difficult to quickly destroy the enemy's forces with concentrated firepower. The current situation was like a bet. He could pour all the cannonballs into the Black Shadows and completely stop them, but as long as the enemy withdrew the spider demons, the First Army would be wasting their ammunition. Apart from the Black Shadows, there were also many mad demons on the two flanks, as if they wanted to form a pincer attack. If the cannons were aimed at them, they would immediately know the result of the battle. However, these demons were very scattered, and it would be a pity to focus on them. That's why the enemy chose to attack at night, Edith said calmly. This is already a gratifying result. Without Sylvie, we wouldn't even know where the enemy is, let alone the blind spot of the shadow. Besides, the demons were always on the receiving end. They didn't panic, so you don't have to worry about it. I just don't want to waste the ammunition that I've accumulated with great difficulty, Iron Axe said with a frown. Chapter 1161. When the two groups of shadows crossed the midfield and advanced to the 5-kilometer zone, the First Army raised the reconnaissance balloons and stopped the artillery bombardment. The Magic Slayer also noticed this, but he could not understand the intention of the humans. The levitating sphere was supposed to be used to see things from a high vantage point, but what was the point of ascending to a higher vantage point when he could not even see anything at night? While the rain of fire stopped, the Magic Slayer ordered the soldiers to speed up. When the shadows crossed the 4-kilometer line, the artillery battalion completed the latest round of ammunition preparation and set up the flare launchers. Since the first night attack, Neverwinter had rushed to produce a batch of simple lighting equipment. It was not much different from a mortar, except that a parachute was installed at the tail of the shell, and the explosive at the head was replaced by a mixture of magnesium and aluminum powder that could burn continuously. The first flare could be used in the same launcher as the mortar shell, but during tests, it was found that the brightness and burning time of the small caliber flare were not good enough, so they replaced it with a special large caliber launcher. Although the soldiers could not shoot as accurately as they could in the daytime, they could at least show the general environment of the battlefield. However, the First Army had never used it in actual combat, which was also the suggestion of the general staff. When the enemies approached the edge of the 3-kilometer zone, Iron Axe could not wait to give the order to counterattack. Yes, Vanner yelled after he hung up the phone. Flare maximum angle fire. With a few soft bangs, several dazzling balls of light suddenly exploded in the night sky. The orange flames dispelled the darkness and revealed the outline of the earth. Then more flare rose into the sky, ignited and fell. Within the 3-kilometer area in front of the position, it was as if a row of small suns had appeared. Although they could not change the day and night, they made the stars and the moon lose their luster for a moment. The huge stone pillars, spider demons, and mad demons that had been hiding in the night sky also showed themselves. Even if it was only a small area, it was enough to point out the target for the cannons. After a round of test firing, the dense shells whizzed toward the back of the god's stone. Unlike the previous aimless shooting, this time the cannons were completely prepared. The demons were obviously stunned and did not know whether to move forward or to flee from the area that was suddenly covered by the light. For a moment, they were stuck in a stalemate. In an instant, a deafening explosion engulfed the enemy's crooked marching troops. Osruk looked at the light balls that were slowly falling from the sky, and his indifferent expression finally showed a trace of change. Now it understood the significance of humans raising the floating sphere. 6 months ago, they were still at their wits' end against the night attack, and could only passively guard the camp. But now they had come up with a countermeasure, and they had endured until now to use it. Whether it was in terms of methods or temperament, he could no longer be treated as a harmless bug. Such a human could already be considered as their opponent. He had to let the king understand this. It instantly made a judgment. At the same time, Osruk made up his mind. Cutting off the enemy's eyes and arms was the most important goal at the moment. Otherwise, this unit might bring endless trouble to the tribe's development plans. It shifted its gaze back to its feet. Under the bombardment of the humans' fire rain, the god's stone pillars of punishment and the follow-up troops had begun to disconnect. According to the original plan, these pillars should be able to push into the tombstone's attack range. At that time, they would be able to cooperate with the primal demons on both sides to launch an attack to recover the disadvantage in range and maximize the killing efficiency of the troops. But now the illuminated area had cut off the army's route. If they forced their way through, they would only become the target of the fire rain. After losing the cover of the night, the originally hidden blind spot had become a narrow stretch of land of death. Destroy those light balls? No. The humans obviously had as many of these things as they wanted. Not to mention that there were people in the camp watching it. Osruk suddenly increased its speed and flew toward the enemy's camp. After avoiding a series of fire crossbows, it landed in front of a floating sphere and rushed to grab the observer's neck when he jumped out of the basket. Looking at the terrified human, Osruk revealed a ferocious smile and then tore the human in half. Then it threw the body down, raised its head and let out a sharp howl. Along with the howl was the order for the general attack. Sensing its will, the primal demons also let out the same roar. They all rushed out of their hiding places and launched a final charge toward the human camp. In an instant, the earth was boiling. The battle finally returned to the way the first army was most familiar with. A large number of demons emerged from the blind spot, and for a moment, it seemed that the enemy was everywhere. The rising flares illuminated the last 3 kilometers. The mortars and heavy machine guns opened fire almost at the same time, as if they were going to overturn the entire ground. Probably because both sides knew the meaning of this decisive battle, they did not hold back once the battle began. The two forces collided and instantly turned the plain into a bloody meat grinder. As long as the mad demons crawled into the spear-throwing range, they would not hesitate to throw bone spears until their arms were useless. Even if their legs were broken and their bodies were pierced, they would continue to wriggle forward with blue blood trailing behind them. And the first army did not take a step back. The machine gun squad poured out bullets like water. Even in the face of the spider demon's stone needles, they did not have the slightest intention of dodging. After the exposed shooters were shot down, the wounded and the dead would immediately be replaced by the new squad members. The only time they could stop was when they had to replace the broken barrels. The fierce battle lasted from midnight until dawn. When the first rays of dawn appeared in the sky, dozens of devil beasts joined the battle. Under the morning light, this was undoubtedly the demons' last chance. At this time, the pressure on the ground had greatly decreased. More machine gun squads raised their muzzles and worked with the anti-aircraft squad to form an airtight anti-aircraft net. The Magic Slayer tried to break into the defensive line several times, but he was forced back by the dense hail of bullets. The scales of victory were gradually tipping in the humans' favor. At noon, the gunfire subsided. Agatha followed Iron Axe and the others out of the underground command center and slowly walked to the front of the battlefield. The air was still filled with the pungent smell of gunpowder, but she found it surprisingly attractive. The grassland, which had been lush and green yesterday, was now a mess. There were potholes and corpses everywhere. The enemy's blood flowed along the ground and soaked into the soil. The grass and shrubs in the way reflected a faint blue luster under the sun. The tequila ruins in the distance were still occupied by the giant skeletons, but Agatha knew that after this battle, the demons would no longer be able to stop the humans' advance. They were only one step away from retaking the holy city. We won. Roland did not know who shouted first. Maybe it was a common soldier, a witch, or a tequila survivor. But it did not matter anymore, because the next moment, cheers of victory spread through the entire camp. Chapter 1162. The celebration only lasted for a short while before the front line became busy again. Treating the wounded, calculating the results of the battle, advancing the railway, cleaning up the battlefield. These were all urgent tasks. The command center was well aware that the victory of this battle did not mean the end of Operation Torch. Judging from the number of demons left, it was impossible for them to launch another attack of such a large scale. The capture of Tequila was almost a foregone conclusion. However, no one dared to take it lightly until the last step. Moreover, the Magic Slayer was still alive. If they could not completely eliminate this threat, they would not be able to achieve their goal. The victory of the human race was indeed worthy of celebration. But they would have to wait until they could raise the flag of Grey Castle at the highest point of the ruins and return to Neverwinter. After some discussion, the leaders of the United Front reached a consensus. After eliminating the demons in this battle, there should be less than 500 enemies left in the ruins of the Holy City. In terms of strength, this meant that the demons could no longer pose a direct threat to the First Army. Compared to the previous steady advance, the first priority now was to prevent the Magic Slayer from escaping. The construction of Tower Station Number 10 could be slowed down, so that the demons would not lose their will to fight. At the same time, the ambush should be carried out as soon as possible. Even without Sylvie's reconnaissance, the First Army was unlikely to be ambushed. In order to avoid trouble, after a day of rest, the First Army began to bombard the demons again. This time, however, they were on the offensive. In the face of the whistling shells, the only thing the enemies could do was to retreat step by step. They left the trenches and retreated into the ruins of Tequila. During this period, only the Magic Slayer could threaten the defensive line. However, as the main target, it was difficult for him to even approach the encampment, let alone stop the First Army from advancing. As the Magic Slayer returned without success, the number of times he was dispatched became less and less. On the fourth day after the battle, the railway finally reached the firing range of 10 kilometers. After the cannons were set up, Iron Axe invited Agatha, Phyllis, and the other soldiers to stand in front of the Longsong cannons. As the number of cannons was far from enough, Vanner, the commander of the artillery battalion, specially prepared a dozen hemp ropes and tied them together with the firing cord. In this way, they could fire the first cannon aimed at Tequila City at the same time. The Awakened who was born in Tequila, the Avenger who purified Tequila, and the builder of the new holy city in the future. Every god's punishment which realized that this would be a historic moment. Regardless of whether they could survive until the Battle of Divine Will, this scene would be remembered in history. I must apologize. Holding the rope, Phyllis whispered to Agatha, for 100 years ago, I laughed behind your back at the way you used mortals, saying that handing over the important work at hand to them would only make the result a mess. Many people did say that back then. The Ice Witch smiled. What about now? Now. Phyllis curled up the corner of her mouth. It doesn't feel bad to fight alongside mortals. Ready. At this moment Vanner raised the command flag. Fire. Everyone pulled back the firing cord at the same time. A rumbling sound immediately echoed over the battlefield. More than a dozen cannonballs soared into the sky, swept across the plain, and fell into the ruins of the holy city. Violent shockwaves spread in all directions along with a series of explosions, sweeping through the ruins of the ancient city that was left behind 400 years ago. Along with the shockwaves and stone fragments, the demons that were hiding within were torn apart. It's begun, Sylvie said in a low voice. Yes, Andrea replied casually. Even though she could not see the situation in Tequila, she could hear the muffled explosions. The tremor was completely different from the roar of the cannons. Even from 7 or 8 kilometers away, she could feel the power contained in the explosions. It was hard to imagine how the demons would feel after being bombarded by the Longsong cannons for a whole night. It's the 5th day, isn't it? Maggie mumbled. Will the magic slayer come today? Who knows? Ashes shrugged. I want to go back to Neverwinter and eat hot pot and fried dumplings. Gulp. Before her voice trailed off, everyone heard the sound of their stomachs moving. Of course, teppanyaki is good too. It would be even better if we could have some ice cream bread. Ashes stuffed a piece of dry food into Maggie's mouth. If you're hungry, eat more of this. It doesn't taste good, but at least it'll fill you up. Don't forget that we're still on a mission, Camilla Derry added. We can worry about food when we get back. Now please focus on your duty. She was still as serious as ever, even though she had just swallowed her saliva a moment ago. Andrea shook her head and turned her attention back to the Tequila ruins. While the First Army was on the offensive, the Special Task Force also left the camp according to their plan. They went around the ruins of Tequila and hid in the woods to the west of the supply line. Since they could not determine the Magic Slayer's intention and time, they could only wait patiently for an opportunity to come. Although it was not difficult for the witches to survive in the wild, considering the devil beasts in the sky, they did not even have a tent to shelter them from the rain, let alone a fire to roast the game. Every night, they would sleep in the trees wrapped in thick cloth and eat wheat cakes when they were hungry. Of course, it was not comfortable for them. To be honest, when she heard Maggie's words just now, she suddenly missed Neverwinter very much. When she first moved from Sleeping Island to Neverwinter with Tilly, she had thought it was just another place to settle down, and that the so-called home of witches was just a bluff. If Tilly decided to leave, she would follow her without hesitation. However, now that she was faced with this problem, she was not so sure. Even as a member of the Quinn nobility, she had never enjoyed such a comfortable life. A large, soft bed, a variety of delicious dishes, automatic hot and cold water supply, and a heater that allowed her to walk barefoot in winter. It was not just a luxury that came from the Golden Dragon. Instead, it was an exquisite and unique life. She found it hard to make a decision when she thought about saying goodbye to all these. Fortunately, Tilly and Roland got along well, so she did not have to worry about where she should go for the time being. When we get rid of the Magic Slayer, I must ask His Majesty to reward me, Andrea thought. The most ideal outcome was that the Magic Slayer would defend the Tequila and be blasted into pieces by the cannons. The second scenario was that the Magic Slayer did not notice the existence of the ambush team and was killed by the God's Wrath bullet in the air. The worst scenario was that the Magic Slayer had already noticed their long-range precision attack ability and was flying close to the ground and constantly changing directions to avoid them. In that case, they would have to rely on the Seagull to intercept them. However, she was not very confident in the first two scenarios. 5 days ago, during the night battle, the Magic Slayer had once approached the camp from the Tequila. However, he had been moving irregularly the whole time and did not give her a chance to attack. Was it a coincidence, or was he deliberately guarding against her? Awoo! Suddenly, a strange cry reached everyone's ears. What happened? Ashes asked. A cannonball hit the giant skeleton. Sylvie exclaimed. There's a big hole in its back. My God, that thing is howling. So it can also feel pain? Just by looking at it, I thought it was just an empty shell. The place where it was hit is spewing out red mist, like blood. Sylvie gazed toward the southeast with a grave expression. The Magic Slayer is on the move. He's charging toward our position. I hope someone can kill it with one shot. Andrea spread out her hands. Wait. No, the Magic Slayer turned back halfway. Sylvie observed for a moment and could not help but frown. What's going on? The giant skeleton seems to be retreating. Some demons tried to stop the giant skeleton, but they were trampled to a pulp. The ruins are in a mess, they are. After a while, she said in an uncertain tone. The demons are killing each other? Andrea and Ashes exchanged a look. No matter how they looked at it, it was a sign of defeat. Could it be that the magic slayer could not bear the pressure and had completely lost the will to fight? Soon, Sylvie's words confirmed their suspicions. Chapter 1163. Andrea. Camilla yelled. I know. Andrea quickly grabbed the gun, closed her eyes, and threw all distracting thoughts to the back of her mind. I didn't notice. Andrea muttered in her mind several times before she suddenly opened her eyes. In an instant, her vision suddenly became distorted. Everything in front of her seemed to have countless overlapping images. They stretched and overlapped with each other, and continued to extend into the distance. That was the perception of the magic surging into her brain. As the layers of trees and land that should have been blocked appeared one by one, the closed world suddenly became open and free. At the same time, Sylvie's consciousness was also connected. When the double images in her eyes completely merged together, her gaze had already followed the other's train of thought, and was cast several kilometers away. A familiar figure in pitch-black armor was reflected in her eyes. What was even more intense than her vision was the magic slayer's surging magic power, which burst out from his body and was so dense that it was almost tangible. Perhaps the skeleton's escape was too sudden, or the loss of Tequila was too great a blow. But the magic slayer was flying straight in the air without any guards around him. What's the situation? Ashes asked in a low voice. The magic slayer didn't notice us. Andrea replied excitedly. He's flying toward the supply line. Although he's a little to the east, he's still within the gun's firing range. Load the gun, there's no better chance than this. Ashes nodded and stuffed the huge god's punishment bullet into the barrel. Then with a click, she pushed the bolt back into the gun. The magic slayer was about 8 to 9 kilometers away. The wind was blowing in the northeast, and there were no other demons around. This was the ideal situation. Andrea focused all her attention on the target, and held her breath to activate her ability. Countless lines swarmed out, and converged on the magic slayer. Some of them twisted and turned, while others rose and fell. It was hard to imagine that a bullet could leave such a strange trail. But soon most of the lines dimmed, leaving only a silver curve that shone brighter and brighter. She had found the coin that was going up. At the same time, the magic power in her body was rapidly decreasing. She did not have much time to hesitate. This was her only chance. Andrea gritted her teeth and pulled the trigger. Accompanied by a deafening explosion, she felt as if her shoulder was hit by something heavy, and her whole body fell backward. Ashes, who was at the side, was already prepared and pulled her into the crook of her arm with one hand. I really don't want to be hugged like this. The corner of Andrea's mouth twitched, but her body relaxed. At this moment, her shoulder was almost numb, as if she had lost all feeling. Even if he didn't look, he knew that there must be a red swelling under his clothes. If not for Nana's treatment, he was afraid that it would take a few days to recover. This was the burden brought about by the large caliber. Even if they used a variety of buffering methods, including muzzle recoil, the remaining impact could not be underestimated. During the weapon test, she had already noticed that even if she created more God's punishment bullets, there would not be a second chance to fire. Whether it was her magic capacity, her physical strength, or the load on the arc, all of them limited her ability. However, the ability to kill in one strike was what she was most proud of. Fighting back and forth with the enemy and being bathed in blood was something only a barbarian liked to do. For example, the guy who was holding her now. If it weren't for the fact that Sylvie is feeling the same way as you, I wouldn't care about you at all. Ashes rolled her eyes. Look at the result, the magic slayer. Wait a moment. Andrea made a shushing gesture. The bullet is still on its way. The silver line in her vision was rapidly shrinking. Its end was no longer connected to the magic slayer, but crisscrossed in front of him, forming a subtle angle. From her point of view, it looked like the relationship between the bullet and the demon was a mutual competition. They were heading for the same target, and would eventually converge at a single point. Once the trigger was pulled, the result was already decided. The god's punishment bullet would fly along the predetermined trajectory, and the only variable was the target. If the magic slayer suddenly changed direction, nothing would happen. 25 seconds was neither long nor short. The only thing Andrea could do was to pray silently and hope that the magic slayer would maintain his current posture. The gust of wind from the west to the east pushed the bullet forward, allowing it to fly at high speed and close to the demon. In the last few seconds, Andrea held her breath and even prayed in her heart. Don't move, don't move, don't move. At this moment, the magic slayer suddenly turned his head and met her eyes. Andrea felt as if all the blood in her body had frozen. However, the next moment, the bullet fell from the sky and hit him squarely in the back. The huge impact shattered the god stone, turning it from a black shadow into countless tiny pieces. However, the magic slayer's body was even more shattered than the god's stone. If she had not seen it with her own eyes, she would not have imagined that a stone as wide as 2 fingers could have such amazing destructive power. The magic slayer's thick armor was torn apart like a rag. After the bullet drilled into his body, it directly blasted a large hole in his chest. Blood, flesh, and organs gushed out like a turbid fountain. Perhaps because the hole was too big, the magic slayer tumbled twice before breaking into 2 halves and falling to the ground at the same speed. Only then did Andrea recover from the shock. She swallowed and said, "The target is dead." "We did it?" Maggie asked joyfully. "Yes," Sylvie said with a sigh of relief. "The bullet split him in 2. Even if Nana was there, she wouldn't have been able to save him." "Well done." Ashes patted Andrea on the shoulder and then took out the sigil of listening. "Lightning, ask the seagull to rendezvous with us. The mission is over. We can go back now." "Understood." Lightning's reply came quickly from the other end. The sniper rifle was soon dismantled into its spare parts. Once the other team returned from the Eastern Front, they would be able to set off. Everyone relaxed at the thought of being able to return home immediately. Andrea was the only exception. The entire ambush process was normal, just as they had planned, except for the last moment when the magic slayer turned his head. Even now, she could still feel the lingering coldness on her back. Did he notice that she was looking at him? But how was that possible? They were 8 or 9 kilometers apart and separated by a forest. It would be like looking for a needle at the bottom of the sea to find them. Moreover, the magic slayer did not look for them. Instead, he suddenly looked at her as if he had known that she was here. Also, Sylvie should have seen it too. Why didn't she feel anything strange? Or did she think that it was just a coincidence and that it wasn't worth thinking about? After all, the magic slayer was already dead. No matter what he was thinking at that moment, there was no need to investigate the reason behind his actions. Andrea rubbed her forehead, and her fingers suddenly stopped. She remembered that Ash's face was injured when she fought with the magic slayer to protect Leaf. "By the way, how long will it take for you to recover from light wounds like a cut on the skin with your own recovery ability?" Andrea looked at the superhuman. Ashes shrugged her shoulders. "About 1 to 2 hours. Why do you ask?" "That is to say, the wound will start to heal in 10 minutes, right?" Andrea stared at the magic slayer's face and asked, "Do you feel it getting better now?" The magic slayer was stunned and touched her cheek. "Strange. It still hurts a little." Sylvie was the first to react. Her expression changed drastically. She forced herself to endure the exhaustion of her body, and once again opened her magic eyes. Then, she looked behind everyone with a look of horror. "Dang, be careful." Ashes drew her sword and turned around at lightning speed. She swung her sword upward with all her might. With a clang, a black shadow brushed past the blade of the sword and pierced straight into Maggie's body. The force was so great that she was sent flying. Before the others had the time to check on her condition, a tall, slender, and blue humanoid devil slowly appeared in front of them. "Found you." The bone-chilling coldness once again enveloped Andrea. She could not believe that the demon in front of her was as calm as the surface of a lake. She did not feel any magic fluctuation from the moment it appeared. Chapter 1164. "Maggie!" Ashes yelled, and at the same time, she stood in front of everyone. She was met with a series of painful coughs. Although Maggie seemed to be in a terrible state, at least she was still alive. "You have quick reflexes, extraordinary." The demon revealed a human expression of regret. Had it not been for your sword, she would have died a painless death. But what you're doing is just prolonging the torture she's going through. It's meaningless. It was not a coincidence that he had chosen Maggie as his first target. Looking into the demon's eyes, Andrea suddenly realized that this was a well-thought-out attack. Maggie could not be of much help in a one-on-one fight, but as the only witch who could help them escape, once she was eliminated, the others would be cut off. She bit her lip and secretly glanced back. She saw that the bone spear was stuck in Maggie's shoulder, and the blood that seeped out dyed a large area of her clothes red. Maggie's breath was weak, probably because of the injury to her lungs. She coughed up blood from time to time. If Ashes had not raised her hand, the bone spear would have pierced through the witch's heart. However, even if she was not dead, she would not be able to control her ability to maintain the magic Arkansas. How did the demon slayer know about Maggie's ability? You're the human's eye, aren't you? If not for you, we wouldn't have been forced into this state by the fiery rain. The magic slayer's next words tore apart her last hope. He pointed at Sylvie and then turned to Andrea. And you must be the divine archer. You might not have been a big deal 400 years ago, but now you're even more difficult to deal with than a transcendent. Fortunately, you've all gathered together. After saying that, he stretched out his right hand and pressed it on his chest. Please allow me to introduce myself. I'm Osruk, the commander of this expeditionary force, and also your undertaker. Without a doubt, this was a trap that had been planned for a long time. Andrea's expression became increasingly unsightly. Since when did the magic slayer become synonymous with surging magic waves? That's right. Ever since the magic slayer came to the north of the misty forest and attacked Leaf, his striking features had been engraved in everyone's mind. In fact, it could be traced back even further. When Lightning encountered the magic slayer for the first time, she felt a strong, almost tangible magic power. Since it was so powerful, wasn't it only natural that it could be captured by the demon eye from a distance? In the long battle that followed, the other party kept reinforcing this impression, exposing his whereabouts to Sylvie's surveillance, which made everyone believe it without a doubt. However, all of this was just an illusion created by the magic slayer. It used itself as bait and drew everyone's attention to the front of the stage. Could it be that it had been preparing for today from the very beginning? But such a statement was simply untenable. The senior demon Ursruk had lost Tequila and thousands of demons on the fertile plains in order to set up a trap for Sylvie and Sylvie. Even if the senior demon Ursruk had sensed Sylvie and Sylvie's existence during the Battle of the Northbound Slope and decided to kill them as soon as possible, Ursruk had actually abandoned Tequila and killed thousands of demons on the fertile plains. If the magic slayer was ruthless and did not care about the lives of his subordinates, then what about the holy city? Without the Godstone mine, they would not be able to build the obelisk, which meant that in the next 400 years, the demons would completely lose the opportunity to lay their hands on the fertile plains. If this was the price they had to pay, it was simply too much. Was it really worth the magic slayer's sacrifice? Andrea's mind was a mess, and she could not make sense of it at all. However, Sylvie asked the most important question. Why? Tequila should be more important than us. The magic slayer did not attack immediately. He shook his head slightly and said, I can't tell you. Can't I even know the answer before I die? But you're not dead yet. Osruk's voice was tinged with sarcasm. Even though you're trapped, you still haven't given up, have you? What was he waiting for? Was he waiting for the magic stone to fully recover? But his arm did not show any signs of withering. No matter what, this was an opportunity. Andrea swallowed hard. Judging from the previous battle, Ashes could at most stall the magic slayer for a while, and she did not have much magic power left. Even if she added all her magic power together, they would not be able to increase their chances of winning to more than 50%. As for Sylvie, Camilla, and Maggie, they would only make their chances of winning even lower. The only way to break through was with Lightning. She had not shown herself yet, which meant that she had sensed something unusual. If she could guide the seagull to help, they might be able to turn the tables. Instead of attacking now, it was better to ask more questions to stall for time. Andrea already had a lot of questions in her head. She looked at the magic slayer and said in a low voice, "I don't understand. Even if we were distracted by the illusion, we couldn't have overlooked an enemy that was lurking nearby. Before we opened fire, we clearly checked our surroundings. We're 8 to 9 kilometers away from Tequila. We won't be able to get there in a short time. Where are you hiding?" "In the past 6 months, we've dug many underground tunnels, but not at the front line but behind Tequila," Osruk replied unhurriedly. "The entrance to the tunnel is located in the God's stone mining area, which is difficult to discover. These tunnels are buried deep, so it's normal that you've overlooked them." He looked up at the sky. "The humans have been monitoring this area, right? Besides, you've never let your guard down along the way. You've seen every movement on the surface. It's this illusion of safety that led you into the trap." "There's a tunnel nearby?" Andrea felt a vague sense of unease. "Even if you're hiding underground, you're just hiding yourself. It's not an easy task to find us in such a large area. Besides, we've been changing our positions many times over the past few days. How did you see us?" "I didn't see you. You saw me." The magic slayer suddenly revealed a ferocious smile. "By the way, I'm not the only one who saw me. Where's that flying little guy? If you have a backup plan, he should have arrived by now, right?" Andrea felt as if she had fallen into an ice cave. "When you see it, it will also see you." This was the characteristic of an alert eye demon. Could it be that he had killed 1,000 eye demon? But its body should be much larger than the magic slayer's. Or did Osruk somehow give that flying demon some of the eye demon's abilities? However, none of this was important. She now completely understood where the uneasiness from before came from. Since there was a secret underground tunnel, how could the magic slayer be the only one hiding there? The reason why the enemy had not attacked was that it was waiting for reinforcements. It wanted to catch them all in one fell swoop. Just at this moment, several grenades whizzed out of the woods and headed straight for Osruk's side. The magic slayer flew into the air and effortlessly dodged this round of surprise attack. The grenades did not slow down at all and plunged into the woods, setting off a series of violent explosions. Before the scorching heat subsided, a dense barrage of gunshots followed and engulfed the magic slayer's position. Osruk was forced to fly higher again, and at the same time his body glowed with a blue light. "The God's punishment witches are here," Sylvie exclaimed joyfully. "Are you all right?" Zoe dashed out of the trees and stood between the magic slayer and the ambush team. The other 7 God's punishment witches followed closely behind to protect them. "Let's go, we have to get out of here." Andrea's heart was in her throat. She did not have time to explain and shouted at the others. At this moment, Osruk also raised his fist. 2 muffled sounds came from afar. "Shio." Shio. Sylvie's expression changed instantly. No one knew better than her what that sound meant. "Watch out, it's the spider demon." 2 black stone pillars flew above their heads in the blink of an eye. With a muffled explosion, a dense number of long needles rained down on the sniper point. Andrea gathered the last of her magic power, accelerated the air in front of her to the limit, and pushed it toward the sky. However, nothing happened. A black light swept across and shattered the magic power that was about to be released. The magic slayer had activated the anti-magic field. Elena, who was the closest to Andrea, leaped up and dashed toward a nearby tree with Andrea in her arms. Everything happened in an instant. Chapter 1165. Don't move. Elena's voice came from beside her. Then, with 2 swishing sounds, one of the stone needles was cut off. The numbness gradually subsided and was replaced by a bone-deep pain. Andrea clenched her teeth to prevent herself from screaming out loud. She looked up and saw that the place where they had been standing had been filled with the long needles of the spider demons. Had it not been for the God's punishment witches, she would have been nailed to death on the spot. However, even though Andrea was as skilled as an extraordinary, it was still extremely difficult for her to completely avoid such a wide range of attacks. When Andrea had jumped out with Elena, a stone needle had pierced her thigh and penetrated her legs and knees. After the stone needle was cut off, her twisted flesh and bones could still be vaguely seen. Her pants were soaked with blood, and the wound was a bloody mess. Elena was not much better off. Her abdomen had been pierced by a stone needle. Her internal organs had been blocked by half of the needle head. Fortunately, the body of a god's punishment warrior could not feel pain, so she could still maintain a high level of concentration. In just a few seconds, Andrea felt her forehead was covered with cold sweat. She struggled to take out the pain-relieving pill made by Leaf and put it into her mouth. The bitter and astringent taste pulled her consciousness back. Ashes had already started fighting with the magic slayer. The others had temporarily escaped the disaster thanks to the protection of the god's punishment witches. However, they were all in a sorry state with many new wounds all over their bodies. If the magic slayer shot at them again, they would probably die. Fresh footsteps could be heard in the forest. Obviously, Osruk had prepared a trap for more than just 2 spider demons. The god's punishment witches were restrained by the wounded and could not fight back at all. The situation was extremely unfavorable for them. Andrea grabbed Elena's hand and said in a hoarse voice, "Gather everyone and retreat to the west. It'll be too late if we wait any longer." To the west? Elena was stunned. The front line of the First Army is in the south. That route is no longer viable. If we go back the way we came, we will only be surrounded by the demons. The misty forest in the west is the only way out. Apart from the ambush, there might be a sufficient amount of red mist canisters in the underground tunnel. If they were surrounded by the enemies who had nothing to worry about, it was easy to imagine the consequences. Although they would be further away from the support point if they headed west, it would also lengthen the enemy's attack range, provided that they could hold on until then. Now that she thought about it, the magic slayer didn't wait for their reinforcements to arrive. Instead, he needed time to gather his men. The enemy must have dug many tunnels, which should cover all the areas behind them. Only in this way could the enemy be able to approach them quietly no matter where they were ambushing. And the signal for the demons to take action was probably the moment the substitute flew out of Tequila. Got it. Elena nodded and began to ask her teammates to gather around her. Under the bombardment of the shotguns, Osruk wandered around the periphery and used his magic power to raise a gust of wind to deplete their strength. Although the blue light of the barrier appeared on his body many times, he did not seem to be injured at all. Obviously, the stray bullets could not inflict any fatal damage on him. When everyone gathered together, the figure of Mad Demon also appeared in the woods. "Watch out for spears," Ashes shouted. She raised her giant sword and slashed the bone spear in half. The god's punishment witches raised their grenades to counterattack. The scene was chaotic. But Andrea knew that they had a more fatal crisis to deal with. She asked for the sigil of listening from Ashes and shouted to Lightning, "Go find the 2 spider demons and kill them." "But only you and Maggie can do that. Go now. That's the best way to help us." The interval between each spider demon's attack was about 15 minutes. Now that 3 minutes had passed, if they could not eliminate their opponents before the next attack, it would be almost impossible for them to escape from the stone needle rain with their broken bodies. "By the way, tell Tilly to leave this place," Ashes roared without turning her head. Lightning hesitated for a few seconds before she gritted her teeth and said, "I know. You must hold on." "Of course." Andrea forced a smile. "It's not time to give up yet." She shouted to the god's punishment witches, "Give me a weapon." "Can you do it?" Elena, who was carrying Andrea on her back, frowned and said, "If you don't hold on to me, you'll be thrown off." "Don't worry. One hand is enough." She took the bolt rifle handed to her by the god's punishment witches, bit the bolt with her teeth, pulled it back, and pushed the bullet into the chamber. Then she put one hand on Elena's shoulder. Even though Elena had lost her legs, exhausted her magic power, and was tormented by the stinging wounds and the dizziness caused by overconsumption, she was still a terrifying shooter. Barbarian Ashes was still fighting. How could she give up now? "Lightning. What should we do, Ku?" Maggie asked anxiously. "Don't panic. Calm down first." Lightning looked at the dozens of mad demons running wildly in the forest, and the smoke from the explosions in the distance. She forced herself to stay focused. She knew that Andrea was right. Her only advantage was her speed. Once the magic slayer destroyed her ability, it would be difficult for her to fly again. She had to stay calm in such a situation. Judging the situation and adopting the most appropriate response was what an explorer should do. Since it was impossible to escape with them, killing the spider demons was undoubtedly more helpful. His Majesty's newly developed grenade launchers were necessary in order to kill the stone-covered monsters. You find the location of the spider demons. I'll contact the seagull first. Princess Tilly has the weapons we need. Lightning quickly organized her thoughts. Got it. Maggie transformed into a gray-tailed goshawk and flew high into the sky. She accelerated to the limit, and in the blink of an eye, she arrived at the glider hovering outside the sniping point. Where are they? What's the situation now? Vendi asked worriedly as she pulled open the hatch. I don't have time to explain. I need backup weapons. Lightning got into the cabin and carried the grenade launcher and the grenade belt on her back. Just then Tilly said, "The situation is bad, isn't it?" The little girl hesitated for a moment and finally nodded. Yes, Ashes wants you to leave as soon as possible. I see. I'll leave now. Lightning and Vendi were stunned. Because if I stay here, I'll only be a burden to her, and I won't be of any help. Tilly's voice trembled slightly, as if she was trying hard to suppress something. Reason tells me that returning to the camp immediately is the most reasonable choice. Your Highness. But remember to tell her that I'll definitely come back. It won't be long before the seagull arrives with reinforcements. Tell them to hold on until then. At this moment, the cry of an eagle came from the sky. I'll tell Ashes. Lightning took one last look at Tilly and jumped out of the cabin. The weight on her body made it impossible for her to maintain her current height. She fell like a rock to a height of more than 10 meters before she managed to steady herself. If the magic slayer came to catch her again, she would not even be able to escape. She believed in her companions and the courage they gave her. Lightning took a deep breath and flew in the direction Maggie had pointed out. 30 seconds later, she saw her target with her naked eyes. It was a spider demon lying on the ground, spitting out obsidian little by little. The ground beside it had sunk into a large pit, and at the bottom of the pit, there were several holes that seemed to be connected to other places. There were 2 mad demons guarding the spider demon. So Lightning directly ignored them and flew to the top of the target's head. Without hesitation, she aimed at the deformed monster whose carapace was wide open and pulled the trigger. With a bang, the grenade penetrated into the spider demon's body diagonally. The scorching energy of the energy-charged bullet instantly penetrated its abdomen, crushing the muscles and blood vessels wrapped in obsidian into pieces. Chapter 1166. The guarding mad demons roared angrily. They grabbed the bone spears and their arms swelled up rapidly. If it was the old Lightning, the first thing she would have thought of was to drop all the weights and run away as fast as possible. But at this moment, her mind was unexpectedly clear. There was still one spider demon, and she could not stop it without a weapon. No matter what, she could not abandon it. So the only way was to rely on her poor eyesight to avoid it. She deliberately flew up in a straight line. When she passed the canopy and disappeared from the enemy's sight, she suddenly changed her direction and flew horizontally. Almost at the same time, the 2 bone spears pierced through the branches and flew close to her feet to the sky. Lightning let out a long breath and flew to the next location Maggie told her without looking back. However, when she saw the second spider demon, her heart sank. The crystal pillar on the back of the spider demon had fully grown and was raised high. The blood vessels on it glowed blue. Obviously, it was on the verge of launching, and she had not yet loaded a new grenade into the launcher. It was too late. Maggie! Stop it from launching the stone pillar. Oh! The goshawk that had been hovering above suddenly swooped down. At the same time, its body rapidly expanded, and in the blink of an eye, it turned into a huge devil beast. The mad demons guarding the spider demon were also a little stunned, as if they did not understand what was going on. Maggie's huge body hit the side of the spider demon hard, and the sound was no less than that of a cannonball. Sand, stones, and mud flew in all directions. The spider demon that was lying on the ground staggered and fell to one side, almost flipping over. At this moment, the stone pillar was launched almost close to the ground. The mad demons who were not in a good position became the first victim. The almost horizontal pillar rolled past them like a rolling stone, and then crashed into the woods without slowing down. It did not stop until it rolled dozens of meters. Not only did it break into several pieces, but it also swept out an empty space. Well done. After landing on the ground, Lightning quickly loaded the grenade, removed the safety, and aimed it at the spider demon. The latter was still waving its short legs as if it was struggling to get up, but Lightning would not give it a chance. The grenade accurately hit its exposed abdomen, and the flames and shockwaves produced by the explosion directly sprayed out from the other side, blasting a large hole in its stomach. After making sure that the target was silent, Lightning pulled up Maggie, who had returned to her normal state. "Are you okay?" "It's nothing serious. I hit it with the thickest part of my shoulder." She rolled up her sleeves and swung her arm in a circle, pretending that nothing had happened. However, just as she raised it to the highest point, she suddenly froze, and her face scrunched up in pain. "Looks like it's not thick enough." Lightning patted her head and said softly, "I'll roast more game for you in the future, so that you won't have to be afraid of anyone. But for now you have to hold on a little longer, okay?" "Okay." Maggie nodded vigorously. "Then come on." Lightning squatted down and picked up the little girl who had turned into a pigeon. "Let's go help the others. Neverwinter Exploration Group, let's go." Bang! Andrea pulled the trigger and shot down a demon that poked its head out. How many times had she fired the gun? Somewhat numbly, she bit the gun and loaded it. Her mouth was filled with the fishy smell of blood, and her tongue was full of fine residue. She did not know whether it was rust or her own broken teeth. She had probably shot dozens of times. Even if she hit 1 out of 10 times, it was still more than 10 demons. However, the enemy's attack did not weaken at all. Instead, it became fiercer. The mad demon, whom she had never taken seriously before, had now become an extremely difficult opponent. Due to the advantage in numbers, the enemy could stretch the battle line without any scruples and surround them from the side. If it were not for the difference in weapons, they would not have been able to stop the enemy's attack. Fighting in the woods also greatly reduced the effectiveness of the guns. The mad demons used the trees to dodge the bullets, and at the same time, launched a wave of spears. The gods' punishment witches, who had no defensive equipment such as shields and firearms, could only rely on their agility and skills to dodge the attacks. To make matters worse, apart from the aggressive magic slayer, the enemy also had a senior demon. Probably transformed from a lord of hell, the senior demon still looked like a 4-legged demon. Although it was not as powerful as Osruk, its physical strength was exceptionally strong. It often threw trees like spears, and every time it attacked, several gods' punishment witches had to work together to block it. At the same time, it could also summon earth walls to provide cover for its own kind. As the magic slayer and the others took turns to attack, their retreat became slower and slower. Every time they reloaded, aimed and fired, it was as if they were all mechanical movements. The throbbing pain from her wounds and the exhaustion of her body hit her brain one after another. Gradually, Andrea felt herself falling into a trance. After 2 waves of spears, Sylvie, who was protected in the middle of the team, suddenly shouted, "Andrea, watch out to the right." A group of mad demons had attracted most of the gods' punishment witches' firepower. The magic slayer parried Ash's giant sword, and leaped to Elena and Andrea like a ghost. Andrea raised her gun, but Osruk's claw cut it into 2 pieces. Then came the second fatal blow. Everything happened in a split second, and the scene seemed to freeze. She could see the blue light emitting from the magic slayer's palm. The condensed magic power turned his 5 fingers into an indestructible blade. With one swing he could kill her. It was over. She slightly tightened her body, waiting for the heart-wrenching pain to come. However, the death she had expected did not come. At the last moment, Elena suddenly turned around and took the blow for her. The demon's claw left a terrible wound on her chest, exposing her ribs and organs. Even with the god's punishment body, she could not fight with such a wound. Elena collapsed. No. Zoe angrily turned her gun and fired several shots at Osruk. At such a close range, even the magic slayer could not completely dodge. The shield on his body was finally broken. Half of his body was riddled with bullet holes, and blood was gushing out. Surprisingly, the magic slayer did not seem to be in pain. Instead, he thrust his hand into his wounded body with a hideous smile. With the help of the surging magic power, the magic slayer's body healed at a speed visible to the naked eye. Monster! Sylvie, who had witnessed all this, could not help but let out a cry of despair. I gained the ability to plunder life and give it to myself. It's rude to call me a monster. Osrook returned to the other senior demon, and replaced it with a gas canister. Unruffled, he said, every wound on your body and every bit of strength you lose will become part of my nourishment. You should know the result of the battle. Struggling will only increase the pain. If you surrender now, I can let you die painlessly as a reward for your bravery. Bullshit. Zoe cursed. I will never surrender to the demon. I'll tear you into pieces even if I die 1,000 times. But Andrea did not hear these. The gunshots, roars, screams, and warnings seemed to be very far away. She slowly crawled to Elena, turned her over, and held her in her arms. She murmured blankly, "Why? Did you save me?" Ahem. Elena coughed out some blood and laughed in a low voice. It's our destiny to die in battle. The only difference is what we get in return. Our limit has been set, but you have unlimited potential. Isn't it obvious what we should do? Looking at the sorrowful Andrea, the god's punishment which reached out her hand and gently stroked her cheek. Don't feel sorry for me. It doesn't hurt at all. Really, it doesn't hurt at all. I'm just a little sleepy. Her voice gradually faded, and Elena's breathing calmed down. It was as if she had really fallen asleep. Andrea gripped her hand so hard that her vision became blurry. At this moment, the troop had completely stopped moving. 2 more God's punishment witches had been knocked down by the magic slayer, and the enemies on the flanks were gradually closing in. Is this the end? The burden on her body finally exceeded its limit. A strong sense of dizziness overwhelmed her, and she could no longer sit upright. She swayed and fell on her back. Dark clouds had gathered in the sky, as if a storm was brewing. Amidst the thick and dark clouds, she could vaguely see a flickering golden light. Chapter 1167. Ashes found that she could not move any faster. If she had been a little faster, she would have been able to block the spear that had severely injured Maggie. If she had been a little faster, she would have been able to force the magic slayer to retreat before Elena was hit. If she had been a little faster, she would have been able to block the mad demon's attack without falling to the ground. Magic power surged through her body, strengthening her muscles and bones, and at the same time, burning her nerves. The pain did not weaken her willpower. Instead, it made her more focused. If she had been a little faster, Ashes had already entered a new realm where she had fought the magic slayer for the first time. Time seemed to slow down in her eyes. She could clearly see every detail on the battlefield, such as the cracks on the bone spears, the puddles under the demon's feet, the faint rise and fall of Maggie's chest, the blood flowing out of Zoe's body, and so on. She was able to react accordingly. She would either swing her sword to kill the demons or help them. She felt that magic power was continuously flowing into her body and condensing in every part of her body. Perhaps this was the level of advancement that Agatha had mentioned. She thought that she might have already reached that level. The condensed magic power not only provided her with great strength, but also gave her a keen sense of perception, which enabled her to fight 2 senior demons at the same time without falling into a disadvantageous position. But that was all. Clang! Ash's sword and the magic slayer's arm collided, sending out a series of sparks. What's the matter? Is this the fastest you can go? Before Ashes could draw back her sword, Osrook had already flown back and said sarcastically, "If this is all you can do, your companions will die here sooner or later. Or are you deliberately giving up on them?" Ashes turned a deaf ear to his words and turned around to cut down a spear that was flying at her. Don't listen to him. This damn monster is trying to infuriate you and make you lose your mind. Zoe panted as she loaded the remaining bullets into the magazine. She was running out of bullets. If you chase after him impulsively, you'll lose for sure. I know, Ashes said calmly as she nodded. The other party's intentions were very obvious. It was always looking for gaps in the team to launch a surprise attack, and the scattered demons would also follow suit to provide cover or attack. There was almost no delay in their coordination. Even in the face of a shotgun blast, the charging mad demon did not hesitate at all. As long as she was distracted for even a moment, her line of defense could be torn apart by the enemy. The more than 100 men that it had hidden should be the most elite troops in Tequila's garrison. If it weren't for the fact that the 8 Tequila witches were also experienced warriors, they wouldn't have been able to hold on until now. However, the Magic Slayer was right about one thing. This was indeed her fastest speed. Up to this point, every inch of Ash's skin seemed to be burning, which was the sign of magic backfire. For an extraordinary who was constantly training herself, this was the first time that Ashes encountered such a situation. If she stopped now, turned around and broke through the enemy's encirclement, and focused on recuperating for a while until her body completely adapted to the new strength of the magic power, she would definitely be able to reach a higher level. However, that was meaningless to the predicament. She couldn't save anyone. The most she could do was protect herself. If she wanted to turn the situation around, she couldn't rely on speed alone. Perhaps even the Queen of Witches, Alice, couldn't think of a better way. You're an extraordinary, born with unimaginable potential. But if you want to really cross that threshold, you must have a practical goal and a firm will. Phyllis's voice echoed in her ears. Phyllis's words echoed in her ears. According to the records of the Union, the Transcendents were all promoted in battle, and those who failed to cross the threshold all fell at the hands of the demons. I hope you can become the former. At this moment, Ashes realized that the threshold she had to face was completely different from what Phyllis had said. There were 2 paths in front of her. One was to survive and reunite with Tilly, while the other was to go further and reach a new realm that no one had ever reached before. The price was to burn herself. If we desire to use magic power to achieve a certain goal, it will lead us in that direction. The voice became chaotic and distant, as if it came from the sky. It sounded like a whisper, but also like thunder in the distance. What exactly do you want? Here. Look here, open fire. Boom. The explosion, which had been silent for a long time, suddenly rang out again, accompanied by the screams of the demons. Ashes looked in the direction of the sound, and saw that lightning had entered the battlefield from the back of the encirclement. The demons, who were distracted by Maggie and were completely unprepared, were hit by a grenade. The first mad demon to bear the brunt of the explosion was instantly blown away, while the other 2 demons standing close to it were penetrated by the sputtering shrapnel, and instantly lost their ability to fight. Then, an astonishingly large devil beast drilled out of the forest and smashed its way through the demons who had turned their heads to aim at lightning. With the cooperation of the 2, the encirclement was in chaos for a moment, and 5 or 6 of the remaining 20 mad demons were killed in the blink of an eye. Hang in there. We're coming to help. Annoying flies. The Magic Slayer frowned, shook off the confrontation with Ashes, and flew directly toward Lightning and Maggie. Meanwhile, the other senior demon threw a giant tree at Ashes. 2 bone spears were already in the air, one aimed at Zoe, who was barely standing, and the other at Andrea, who was lying on the ground. It was the same situation again. If they stayed, Lightning would be in danger. If they intercepted the Magic Slayer, everyone would be in danger. Since faster speed was useless, then the only thing that could change all of this was power that surpassed speed. Seeing that the 2 demons had returned, Ashes made a decision. Perhaps the decision had been made long ago. During the nights he spent with the Neverwinter witches, during the night he talked to Phyllis, or when Tilly said, "I would much rather see you as you are now than as an Avenger." "I'm sorry, Tilly," Ashes said softly and then took a step forward. "What do you want?" "Yes. I want to protect them." In an instant she saw a surging sea of magic power, which was indescribable. However, there seemed to be countless murmurs and gazes hidden under the torrents. Ashes let go of the restrictions and completely accepted the magic power. Osrook, who was flying halfway, suddenly felt alarmed. He turned his head abruptly, and saw that the extraordinary had raised her big sword and pointed it at the sky. There seemed to be golden light flowing on the blade. The moment he saw the light, he felt his body become inexplicably slow, as if he had fallen into a quagmire. He was not the only one. Even the flow of the air around him became sticky. This was not the first time that Osrook had seen such a scene, but at this moment, he felt that it was unbelievable. How is this possible? That was not the power of the magic stone, but from her own body. He tried to raise his head, hoping that he was wrong, but the rolling golden lightning in the dome shattered his last hope. Judging from the intensity of the gathering magic power, this attack was even more powerful than that of the red-haired witch. It was impossible to dodge. If he could not block it, he would die. Realizing this, Osrook used all his strength to open the interference field. At the same time, his opponent also swung her big sword. The dazzling lightning pierced the sky and illuminated the whole earth. In the deathly silence, Lan suddenly opened her eyes. She stood up from her seat, avoided the motionless people, and walked step by step to the window. This world had not yet woken up, and everything was still at the moment when time was frozen. Whether it was the champagne that was poured out of the bottle, or the raindrops falling from the window, they were suspended in the air, like a stroke in the background of a banquet scroll. In a place where time was frozen, there should be no sound. However, in the dark night, there was a faint sound of thunder. She opened the window and looked at the distant sky in a daze for a long time without saying a word. When lightning recovered from the dazzling lightning, she was surprised to find that the ground where the fierce battle had taken place had turned into a scorched earth. All that was left of the surrounding trees were smoking trunks, and the air was filled with a pungent burnt smell. What happened just now? She only remembered that a mad demon hiding behind a tree suddenly pounced on her. She had focused all her attention on the magic slayer, and only noticed that he was close to her. In a moment of desperation, she threw the launcher at the magic slayer, hoping to stop him. Then, the golden light enveloped her. But now, except for the two senior demons, the rest of the enemies were nowhere to be seen. The one that had been transformed from the Lord of Hell was lying on the ground. His body seemed to have been burned by high temperatures, and his rough skin was cracked open inch by inch. He seemed to be on his last breath. The magic slayer did not look any better. Half of his body had disappeared, and dark light was wriggling around his wounds. He stood motionless. But for some reason, Lightning felt a trace of uncontrollable fear. Right. Ashes. She hurriedly looked at the center of the ground and heaved a sigh of relief. The familiar figure was still standing upright with a sword in her hand, shielding everyone behind her. "Are you okay?" Lightning flew to Ash's side, but before she could finish her sentence, she was interrupted by Ashes. "Take everyone away from here. The farther, the better." "Ha! Listen to me. Leave this place to me, before I can control my power." Unknowingly, there was an unquestionable majesty in Ash's tone, which made Lightning swallow back the words she wanted to ask. So that was the case. Their presence here would only hinder her performance. Looking at her burning golden eyes, at least at this moment, she vaguely understood the meaning of thunder falling from the sky. Lightning asked Maggie to transform into a devil beast and put everyone on her back. Although she could not fly with so many people on her back, she could still run with them. After a while, the two left the ground and ran into the woods. After running for hundreds of meters, Maggie could not help but ask, "How did Ashes trigger the sigil of God's will?" "We didn't bring the sigil of God's will." Chapter 1168. The dark clouds in the sky did not disperse. Instead, more and more bolts of lightning flashed across the sky, creating a thunderous roar. After Lightning and Maggie left with the injured witches, Ashes spat out a mouthful of blood and sank to the ground. Had it not been for the support of her sword, she would not have been able to stand. That blow had almost consumed all of her magic power. Although magic power was still flowing into her body, the process was completely out of her control. It was as if every meridian in her body was being burned by flames. The after effects of magic power exhaustion, and the pain caused by the backlash superimposed on each other. It was simply indescribable. She did not know how much longer she could hold on. but she was sure that she could not fall here. Otherwise, everything she had done would be for naught. The lightning bolt had undoubtedly wounded the magic slayer. Half of its body, which was embedded with a stone of flight, had been vaporized by the golden lightning bolt. Apart from the fact that its movement had been restricted, its strength should have been greatly reduced. But Ashes did not feel this. The magic slayer was still exuding a dangerous aura. Her heightened intuition told her that the enemy in front of her still had the ability to fight. That was why she had asked Lightning and the witches to retreat as soon as possible. In fact, she was not the only one who had caused the chaos in the magic power. A large part of it came from the overflowing power of the magic slayer. Stand up. We have to act before the enemy. Ashes clenched her teeth and slowly rose to her feet. She took the first step forward. At this moment, the scorched senior demon struggled to its feet. Damn it, is it still alive? Ashes had aimed most of her power at the magic slayer, but she had not expected that her attack, which was powerful enough to annihilate a mad demon, could not kill a senior demon. If she had known this, she would have given it another lightning strike. However, to her surprise, the senior demon did not turn around to flee, nor did it rush forward to fight her. Instead, it dragged its broken body toward Osrook. What is it doing? Is it trying to protect the magic slayer? Very well. Ashes clenched the hilt of her sword. Since that's the case, I'll send both of you to hell at once. The moment the lightning pierced through the interference domain, Osrook heard a call that seemed to come from the depths of his soul. In that instant, a miraculous connection was formed. Through the dazzling golden light, it saw something on a deeper level. It was a realm that it had always yearned for but could never reach. With just a single glance, it had crossed the threshold and left its own imprint. This was the fundamental difference between it and a great dark monarch. But now that gap no longer existed. From defending Tequila to ambushing humans, it had paid a great price, and even disobeyed the Sky Lord's order. But it was all worth it. Feeling the power bestowed upon it by the realm of mind, Osrook directly projected his thoughts into the junior guard's mind. Your Excellency, you have been promoted? The latter was overjoyed, but it quickly dimmed. Unfortunately, I will soon return to the origin of magic, and will no longer be able to follow you. No, I haven't leveled up. To be precise, I'm still one step away from leveling up. The divine will just now seriously injured me. In my current condition, I can't rely on my own strength to complete this step. What can I do for you? Offer yourself. The guard's thoughts became excited again. Is that all? Please leave it to me, Your Excellency. Although it could also try to bypass the limitations of the magic stone and directly integrate itself with the origin of magic, just like the extraordinary witches did, it was impossible to predict what the consequences would be. To be on the safe side, it did not mind enduring a little longer. The communication on the mental level happened in the blink of an eye. When the junior guard used the last of his strength to climb up, the extraordinary also slowly stood up. No, it was no longer appropriate to call her an extraordinary. After more than 400 years, humans once again had a transcendent. Fortunately, the previous divine will consumed a lot of energy, and it would be difficult to recover in a short period of time. This was the best chance for it. The junior guard finally reached Osrook. Although it was only a short distance away from Osrook, its life force was already as weak as a candle in the wind. However, its consciousness was getting clearer and clearer. Your Excellency, will our race one day be able to escape the cage of fate, win the battle of divine will, and set foot on the sky that no one has ever reached? There will be such a day, I promise. Osrook paused and said its name. Tartarus. Its eyes lit up as if it was the last ray of light before it was extinguished. Then please take my soul with you. The guard abruptly stood up and forcefully inserted his hand into his forehead. Ashes could not help but be stunned, and then a great sense of crisis welled up in her heart. The senior demon howled and pulled out the magic stone from its head, along with a large piece of flesh, and stuffed it into the magic slayer's body. The wriggling black light around the wound suddenly swelled. She suddenly remembered what Roland had said. Demons needed to fuse with magic stones to enhance their power. Did Osrook intend to complete the promotion ceremony under such circumstances? Regardless of whether it was true or not, they had to be stopped. Ashes endured the burning pain in her body, and once again poured the magic power that she had gathered with great difficulty into her sword. The thunder in the sky responded to her will. When the power reached its peak, she slashed at the target for the second time since entering the new realm. Although the magic power she poured into the sword was not as much as the first strike, it was not much less powerful. The golden thunder once again broke through the clouds and lashed at the place where the demon was standing like a whip. Osruk let out a shrill roar. The black light covering its body turned into a missing arm, and directly grabbed at the lightning. The two collided and immediately triggered a violent explosion. The whistling airwaves raised a large amount of sand and stones, and for a moment, the two people's vision was blocked. When the dust gradually settled, Ash's heart gradually sank. The Magic Slayer's body seemed to be intact, and even the missing half of his body had basically recovered. The only change was that the new arm was several times thicker, and there were two long barbs sticking out of the shoulder and elbow, which looked like the limb of the senior demon. However, the aura he exuded was completely different from before. I have to say, you're a rare genius among witches. Not only did you surpass the previous strongest human, but you also opened the door to the realm of mind. For a race with a lifespan of only a few decades, it's really commendable for you to do this. Osruk stretched out his 5 claws and easily tore apart the body of his own kind. Then he inserted a bottle of blue blood into his own body. Unfortunately, you're not the only genius, especially for those of us who can live beyond the battle of divine will. This is a difference that exists at birth. Although it's a little unfair, fate has no choice. Chapter 1169. The collision between the two of them caused the ground to suddenly boil. Accompanied by the sound of swords clashing, bolts of lightning fell from the sky, smashing the surrounding forest into pieces. The Magic Slayer's body was covered in a layer of black light, like a suit of armor, which weakened the golden lightning. The surging mana caused a heavy downpour. Amidst this dense curtain of rain, the scene of the battle between the two seemed to have become the center of the storm. Be it Ashes or Osruk, their movements were beyond their usual limits. Ordinary people would not be able to see their movements clearly, but it was normal for both of them. Every time they made a move, a clear trajectory would be drawn out in the rain, and the airwaves caused by the collision would cause the raindrops in the surroundings to explode. The sound was like muffled thunder, as if it wasn't a battle between humans and demons, but two tall and sturdy giants fighting with all their might. Who? Ashes felt that the magic power in her body had completely gone out of control. It was devouring her flesh and blood, and her body was riddled with holes. After a certain point, the pain from the backlash became numb. However, this was not a good sign. Losing her sense of pain meant that her mind was distracted, and her ability to control her body was greatly reduced. In fact, she no longer had the ability to accurately control the lightning. She could only let the violent magic power pour out, which further increased the burden on her body. Like a rolling snowball, the balance was quickly tipping towards the side of collapse. I see. Is this the result of directly merging with the origin of magic? The Magic Slayer looked a little tired. He wiped the blood off his face after repelling Ash's attack. Although you have obtained extraordinary power, you are also being devoured by it. I'm curious, if this continues, what will become of you? Will you be burned to ashes by the magic power, or will you become a mindless monster that cannot even be called human? No matter what I become, it will be after I kill you. Ashes replied in a low voice as she shook off the rainwater on her sword. Why? Faith and perseverance? Osruk sneered. That sounds like something a human would say. Unfortunately, time has proven that those are insignificant things. Ashes did not reply, but raised her sword and rushed towards it. After this short but intense battle, she already had a basic understanding of each other's abilities. If they continued to fight, her chances of winning would only become slimmer. The Magic Slayer's movements became smoother and smoother, probably because he was gradually getting used to his new body. His strength and technique were also steadily improving. Not only that, but it seemed to have completely adapted to the rhythm of the battle. Regular slashes could now hardly hurt it. This kind of limitless growth was really chilling. It also made her realize what kind of height a so-called talented person could reach. The only way for her to kill her opponent was to gather enough power of divine will. Ashes did not know why she could trigger a celestial phenomenon without the sigil of God's will. She only knew that the magic power responded to her call, and transformed into golden thunder according to her will. But even if the lightning struck the magic slayer, it would dissipate most of its power, leaving only a few more wounds on the magic slayer. Although it would be effective if she attacked more than enough times, it was a pity that she wouldn't be able to last that long under the constant weakening of her strength. The biggest problem was that it took time to gather the power of divine will, and the magic slayer would definitely not let her finish her attack. She had to create an opportunity for her to gather enough power of divine will. It was obvious what she should do next. Ashes approached Ursruk and fought back and forth for a while. Finally, Ashes purposely revealed a flaw in her defense, and her sword missed its target. The magic slayer would not let go of this opportunity. He clenched his fingers and stabbed at her chest. Instead of retreating, she moved forward and collided with the magic slayer. The sharp claws pierced through her right chest, and only stopped when it reached her elbow. Osruk's expression changed. Ashes coughed out a mouthful of blood, and grabbed the magic slayer with both hands. She said in a low voice, "I got you." At the same time, the gloomy clouds above them began to spin and in the blink of an eye, formed a huge vortex. "What did you say?" Ashes, she became a transcendent? Agatha's surprised voice came from the sigil of listening. After traveling several miles to the west, Lightning finally contacted the command center, and reported to the Ice Witch that they needed help. She was relieved when she learned that the First Army was already on the way. She then told the command center about the Magic Slayer's attack. "I can't think of anyone other than a transcendent who could do that." Lightning slowly flew in the air, and looked at the forest behind her. Lightning flashed and thunder rumbled. Golden serpents pierced through the sky from time to time. Even the sigil of divine will could not sustain such a scene for long. It's indeed a characteristic of extraordinary witches to advance in battle. If she really did overcome that hurdle, she should have no problem dealing with the magic slayer. It was the right choice to let you guys retreat. Anyway, I'm glad everyone is fine. Lightning's expression darkened. The ambush team had suffered some casualties, but she did not tell the magic slayer about it. After a moment of silence, she changed the topic. What about the demons? Did they also advance in battle? For some reason, the fear of the magic slayer lingered in her heart for a long time. Osruk's motionless posture and the wriggling black light around his wound gave her a very strange feeling. There's no record of this in the Union. According to His Majesty's memory fragments, they need to successfully fuse high-quality magic stones to enhance their power. Agatha replied. Of course, it's possible that battles played a crucial role in their advancement. If I'm not mistaken, fusing with magic stones is similar to passing the day of adulthood for witches. It's a test of the body's tolerance for magic power. The so-called failure of the fusion might be a manifestation of the backlash. By the way, why do you ask? No, nothing. Lightning bit her lip. I'm just a little worried. It was not impossible for the magic slayer to carry a few high-quality magic stones with him. But could anyone really advance in the midst of a fierce battle? When a witch passed the day of adulthood, she would usually lie in bed and wait for the moment to come. Don't worry. Transcendents don't need to rely on their abilities to fight. If the magic slayer's greatest restraint against witches doesn't work, I believe he'll win soon, Agatha comforted her. Well, I think so. She nodded and was about to descend to return to Maggie when a series of dull roars suddenly came from afar. Lightning turned her head and could not help but freeze in place. The dark clouds in the sky surged like a tide and gathered in the place where she had left. Layer by layer, they formed a gray cloud tower. It rotated slowly, like a passage connecting the sky and the earth. She had only seen such a spectacle on the sea. When a strong storm came, a huge whirlpool would appear in the sky. If one did not find a way to avoid it or sail into the center of the whirlpool, any ship would be torn to pieces by the huge waves that followed. But this was the land. What happened? The voice in the sigil of listening was interrupted. What was that sound? Lightning could not help but clench her fists. I don't know. How long will it take for Princess Tilly's reinforcements to arrive? The gods' punishment witches are moving combat equipment to the Seagull. It'll take them about 10 to 15 minutes to get there. 15 minutes. She was silent for a moment, and then ended the call. Flying back to Maggie, Lightning began to search among the unconscious wounded. The thunder was so dense. Oh, will Ashes be okay? Maggie asked as they hurried along. She'll be fine. She's a transcendent. You just need to send everyone safely to the rendezvous point. Did you forget where it is? Of course. Oh, just go around the Tequila ruins and turn southeast. Wait, why me and not us? Chapter 1170. Rumble, 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 rumble. Lightning flashed densely in the vortex formed by the dark clouds, and gradually moved closer to the center. Heavy rain poured down from the strong winds, stirring up a hazy mist in the forest. The new Grand Lord and the Transcendent were tightly pressed together like two fused statues. The surging magic power had completely surrounded Ashes, and her body was even surrounded by a golden stream of light. This was also the target of the divine will. She used herself as a sharp blade. Is this your final struggle? Asruk roared. You want to use this method to perish together with me? How foolish. I won't let go, Ashes said with difficulty. With half of her chest and lungs pierced, even breathing became difficult. Blood flowed back into her trachea, and her mouth and nose were filled with the salty smell of rust. 5 minutes. She kept telling herself that only 5 minutes was enough. Her opponent's strength was not much different from hers. As long as she did not let go, it was basically impossible for him to break free from her restraints. Do you think that I will use my strength to determine victory or defeat? Asruk's face looked even more ferocious under the rain. It seems that you have imprisoned me, but in fact, this is just a cage that you have created for yourself. After saying that, several black lights extended from his chest and pierced into Ashes's body like tentacles. She could not help but cry out in pain. She originally thought that it would not be more painful than the magic power backlash, but the pain caused by the black lights was actually several times worse than the burning of her body. It was as if countless thin needles had been pierced into her brain. If not for the fact that she had repeatedly warned herself not to lose consciousness no matter what, she was afraid that she would have already fainted. However, the unbearable pain was just the beginning. Black lines began to spread from the piercing point, and wherever it went, the skin would slightly bulge as if something was crawling in her body. Ashes coughed out a mouthful of blood. You cough, what did you do? A small gift. It is also proof of the gap between our understanding and control of magic power. Asruk moved closer to Ashes's ear. To be honest, I should be thanking you. If not for this battle, I would not have been able to welcome the advancement so quickly. Now you have sent yourself to me. I am looking forward to completely defeating you, to see to what extent I can advance. Ashes suddenly realized that this was another form of erosion. She could not feel the area that was covered by the black lines, as if it did not belong to her anymore. She bit her lip and tried to circulate the magic in her body. She did not wish to corrode back like the enemy, but only hoped that she could prevent the invasion of magic power. You don't even think of controlling me. But even so, the erosion only stopped for a moment. And the speed of the expansion of the black lines slowed. But it still continued. Forward. And apart. And summit. And the black lines. The air. The black lines. The flames. The black lines. The speed. The flames. The black lines. But even so, the erosion only stopped for a short while. The speed at which the black lines were expanding slowed down, but it was still pushing forward. A part of it had already climbed up to Ashes's neck. That's a commendable perseverance. Asruk laughed cruelly. He looked completely different from before. The mutated body not only distorted the face of the senior lord, but also made him lose his human form. He looked no different from a monster. But what's the use of this? I won't give up? Unyielding, hard work, faith, perseverance. These are just the words of the weak to comfort themselves. On the road to survival, who would easily admit defeat? But it's a pity that these words alone can't change anything. If I can keep my race alive just by saying these words, then it's too easy. Intense pain battered Ash's mind. She opened her mouth but no sound came out. The vortex above her head had already formed. Golden light shone within it, but she felt that the power was getting further and further away from her. Whether it's in terms of tolerance to magic power, or the long lifespan required to adapt to magic power, we are far superior to you. This gap is like a bird and a bug. No matter how hard we struggle, we can't make up for this gap. The two battles of divine will have proven this point. Osruk slowly lifted her up, as if he was pronouncing her final fate. So die here in peace. If you want to blame something, blame yourself for being born as a weak human. Don't underestimate humans. Suddenly, a clear shout came from the rainstorm. The voice was so familiar that it made Ashes regain a little clarity of mind. She forced herself to look sideways, only to see a figure rushing out of the forest like lightning. It's lightning? She dragged a long trail of mist through the curtain of rain. After passing through the blackened tree trunks, she charged straight at Osruk. She seemed to be carrying something in her arms. Ash blinked his eyes in confusion. That's 3 grenades? Bug, you're courting death. Osruk instantly activated the anti-magic domain. Just as the black light was about to collide with lightning, she released her arms and changed the direction of her flight. She was separated from the grenades. Although she had lost her ability, inertia still existed. After leaving Lightning's arms, the grenade spread open its tail and flew straight at Osruk without slowing down. The Grand Lord bared his teeth and used all his magic power to erect a blue barrier in front of him. The next moment, 3 flowers of fire bloomed outside the barrier. But that was only the prelude to destruction. The scorching and violent energy was condensed into a dazzling jet by the cone-shaped bullet cover. It hit the barrier and shattered it like glass. After penetrating the defense, the jet cut through Osruk's mutated body like a hot knife through butter, turning the tumor behind him into a pile of mud. The magic stone he obtained from the senior demon was also completely shattered by the attack. Osruk raised his head and screamed. The spreading black lines immediately shrank back, and Ashes felt the pain in her body suddenly disappear, and her consciousness returned to her mind. Without hesitation, she activated the divine decree that she had been accumulating for a long time. Osruk also realized that the situation was not good. He howled and tried to shake off the witch in front of him, but Ashes's hands were tightly clasped around Osruk and naturally would not give him the chance. You're right, humans are indeed weak. But even so, we still want to continue on this path. No matter what challenges lie ahead, we will not retreat. She paused and revealed a smile. Because someone is already standing in front of us, pointing us in the right direction. Following that, a golden thunder that covered the sky pierced through the horizon. In the almost incandescent light, Osruk was completely vaporized. Not a trace of his existence was left behind. The roar of thunder echoed over the fertile plains and did not dissipate for a long time. After the divine decree was extinguished, only ashes was left on the empty ground. Lightning clenched her teeth and slowly climbed up from the ground. When she crashed into the demon's territory, she changed from flying horizontally to flying sideways, so she was thrown out at a high speed like a stone. Fortunately, most of the enemy's energy was focused on the defensive barrier. Before she hit the ground, she got rid of the binding of the black light and hurried to activate magic synchronization at the last second. As a result, one of her arms was broken, and half of her body was badly mutilated. She limped to Ashes and forced a smile. Finally, we won. Yes, thanks to you. To be honest, I didn't expect you to come back. This is called the sixth sense of an outstanding explorer. You always appear when you need it the most. Lightning suddenly froze. She found that there was something wrong with Wendy. Hey, what's wrong with you? Ashes looked down at her pale hand. Maybe this is the price of burning myself? Burning myself, what does that mean? Lightning could not help but be stunned. The transcendent in front of her was gradually becoming illusory, and her long hair was scattered by the wind. It was as if she was no longer a physical entity, but a virtual image made of countless fireflies. If we desire to use magic to achieve a certain goal, it will lead us in that direction, and I probably forced it to use more power than I can bear. Ashes said softly. So this is what it's like to be completely integrated with magic. If it doesn't turn me into a monster, it's not bad. What the hell are you talking about? Lightning tried to grab her hand, but only managed to raise a cloud of dust. Ashes, tell me. What should I do? Tell Tilly that I like her. The dark clouds in the sky dispersed, and the sun shone through the clouds. In the thousands of beams of light, Ashes closed her eyes and disappeared with the wind. Lightning hugged her to where she stood, but there was nothing left. The little girl hugged her body with one hand and sobbed. Looking at the pitch-black night sky, Lon let out a long sigh and lowered her eyelids. After a long silence, she closed the window and whispered softly. It sounded like she was asking someone, but also like she was talking to herself. What are you looking forward to? There's nothing to hesitate about, right? Hurry up, we don't have time. Chapter 1171. Is that so? I got it. Hearing the news from the front line, Roland felt his heart sink. After a while he replied in a low voice, How's your injury? Then there was silence again. When he spoke again, it was already several minutes later. No, it's not your fault. There should be no ifs at this time. Now that the threat from the front line has been eliminated, take a long vacation, and have a good rest. After hanging up the phone, Roland leaned back in his chair, and heaved a long sigh. Nightingale seemed to have expected something. Instead of flashing to the table as usual, she walked to Roland's side step by step and asked, Was it Leaf? Yes. Roland closed his eyes and said, The war is over. The First Army conquered Tequila at a small cost, and found a half-built tower foundation in the Godstone mine. Although the ambush plan failed, the enemy magic slayer was killed and the curse was gone. It was a blessing in disguise, but... He paused and said, Ashes and Elena didn't survive. That fool? Nightingale could not help but be startled, and then turned her head away. According to Lightning, Ashes became a transcendent in the end and perished together with the demon. Apart from a small piece of the sword hilt that was melted, there was nothing left, Roland said slowly. When he saw the ambush site besieged by the demons through the phantom instrument, he knew there was a problem with the plan. Judging from the demons' arrangement, it seemed that they were waiting for the witches to attack. Unfortunately, he could only see a corner of the battlefield through the light screen. After the special action team decided to retreat to the west, they soon disappeared from his sight. As a result, he was burning with anxiety for the next day and a half. In fact, at that moment, Roland had already prepared for the worst. The final result could be said to be much better than what he had expected. Even so, when he heard that there were casualties, he found that he could not relax at all. After all, he was the one who approved the ambush plan. Although Ashes is arrogant and presumptuous, at least she is serious about every choice she makes. Nightingale put her hand on the back of Roland's hand and said, Elena is even more so. I believe they have long been prepared for this. You don't have to take this responsibility on yourself. What I said to Leaf also applies to you. Roland nodded. He still did not understand why the demons could see through the whole operation in advance, and even regarded the goal of wiping out the witches as more important than the holy city of Tequila. But the fact could not be changed. As the leader of Grey Castle and the United Front, he could not show any depression in front of everyone, no matter what difficulties and setbacks he encountered. If even he fell into the bottom, how could he support those who were even more heartbroken? For example, Tilly. This was also the most difficult problem for Roland to face. From what Leaf had said to Lightning, the relationship between the two was probably much closer than he had thought. Although Tilly did not appear to be grief-stricken at that time and still prioritized transporting the wounded, The absent-mindedness in her eyes could not be concealed. In Lightning's words, it was as if her eyes had suddenly lost their luster. As for why the little girl secretly conveyed her last words to him, it was probably because she hoped that he could comfort Tilly. And this was the thing that Roland was least good at. I can only take one step at a time, he thought to himself. That afternoon, the Seagull returned to Neverwinter. The first batch of people to return were the witches who were not injured or had recovered from minor injuries. Those who were more seriously injured still needed to rest at the frontline camp for a period of time, while Nana completely healed her wounds. Roland personally led the rest of the members of the Union to the airport to welcome their return. Anna, Agatha, Molly, Phyllis. Everyone walked down the gangway one by one and hugged Scroll, Nightingale, Sharon, and the others in turn. The ordinary staff of the Union, such as Belle, Grey Rabbit, and Pearl, were also among them. No matter whether they were combat witches or non-combat witches, whether they were survivors of the Union period, whether they were awakened or ordinary people, at this moment, there was no difference between them. The last one to come down was Tilly. Roland walked up to her and said, "Well, can I talk to you alone, brother?" Tilly raised her head and said. Back in the castle office, Roland said a few words to Nightingale and personally closed the door. "Well, what do you want to say?" As soon as he turned around, he suddenly felt his chest tighten as a figure leaned against him. "Don't move, please." Tilly hugged him and said in a slightly trembling voice, "Just let me lean against you for a while, just for a while." Towards the end of her words, there was already a sob in her throat, and her fingers clutched his back harder and harder, almost as if they were going to dig into his flesh. I see. She was also like him. As the guide of the sleeping spell, she could not show excessive sadness in front of everyone, and the deeper her feelings were, the more painful it was to restrain them. It was not easy for her to hold on until now. Roland gently patted her back and said, "There's no need to hold it in anymore. Don't worry and cry, no one here can hear you." Woo-woo. At first, Tilly let out an extremely suppressed sob, then it became louder and louder, and finally she let out a cry that he had never heard before. Even when she was maliciously bullied by Prince Roland when she was a child, she had never been so sad. Like a person who had lost their most precious treasure, her cry was full of grief. It was no longer important whether there were words to comfort her or not. All he could do was to accompany her to the end. At the same time, at the frontline camp, the tent flap was lifted, and Shavy walked in with a bowl of boiled medicine. "Are we going to drink this thing again?" Andrea asked vaguely. Her legs were tightly wrapped in gauze, and her cheeks were covered with ointment. Although it was not very effective, the cold touch could at least offset some of the pain. "I can't drink it without sugar." "Then, should I ask the medical team for some?" Shavy hesitated. "The medical team won't have sugar, and we're not in Neverwinter." "Forget it, just help me up." Andrea sat up, took the bowl, and drank the bitter painkiller in one gulp. "Ahem, is Nana still busy? How long do I have to wait before I can see her treatment?" I asked her, and she said it would take about 3 or 4 days. She said those God's punishment witches were more seriously injured than you, and said. "Said what?" Shavy muttered in a low voice. "She said your leg injury looked scary, but it's not fatal, and that you just need to drink the medicine." Andrea rolled her eyes. "I'm not that muscular monster. How can this degree of injury heal naturally?" Shavy's eyes reddened. "All right." Andrea coughed twice. "Pretend I didn't say anything." "No." Shavy shook her head. "I just felt that your expression just now was a bit like ashes, so I couldn't help." "I look like her? What are you kidding?" She frowned, but forced herself to suppress it. It seemed a bit vulgar to say it like that. Aristocratic, aristocratic. "Well, I'm just a little tired. You should go back and rest. Remember to tell Lightning or Maggie in advance next time, and ask them to bring back some honey when they patrol. At least it'll make it easier for me to drink the medicine." "Okay, I got it. Thanks." After Shavy left, Andrea found that she couldn't calm down. You only know how to put on a brave front, and become a transcendent in the end. Do you think you're the queen of Starfall City? But now, you killed the Grand Demon Lord. and became a hero who saved everyone. It would have been fine if that was all. She lay down again and pressed her face with her hands. Bastard, have you never thought about it? Chapter 1172. Tilly cried on and off for nearly an hour before she finally calmed down. When Roland put her on the sofa, he found that she had fallen asleep. When the two of them separated, their tears and snot even left a few thin lines between their cheeks and clothes. Of course, it was not convenient for the witches of the sleeping spell to see her undignified appearance. Roland thought for a while, and finally called Anna to carry Tilly to the big bedroom on the 3rd floor of the castle. After wiping her cheeks, Tilly's breathing returned to normal, but she still showed no signs of waking up. Roland could tell that she was indeed very tired. Relying on busy work to numb oneself, this kind of shock therapy was not uncommon. After learning the news of Ash's sacrifice, she probably did not have a moment of good rest. You sleep with her tonight, Roland sighed. At times like this, I'm afraid of being alone the most. You're the only one who can take care of her now. Don't worry. I can feel her mood and know what to do. Anna nodded gently. What about you? I'll sleep in the 3rd border city. I've been there for the past few days anyway, so it doesn't matter if I stay a little longer. Roland replied. And they should know about the success of the torch operation as soon as possible. I think those ancient witches have been waiting for this day for a long time. Okay. Anna came over and kissed his cheek. Although I don't want you to leave, these things are really more important. Sorry, it's rare for you to come back from the front. Don't be silly, Your Majesty. There's still a long way to go. When Roland walked to the door, Anna stopped him again. By the way, don't forget to call Nightingale, she said seriously. The only person in this city who can't have an accident is you. Looking into her clear eyes, Roland agreed and closed the door. As soon as Roland entered the 3rd border city with a large group of guards, Pasha appeared in front of him. Your Majesty, any news from the front? How's the situation? From the swaying whiskers all over her body, one could tell that she was currently in a state of unease and unrest. Roland had no intention of keeping Roland in suspense and replied bluntly, We won a complete victory. The demons on the plain were wiped out, and the magic slayer failed to escape. The First Army now controls Tequila. Pasha's tentacles instantly stopped moving. After a few seconds of silence, she said excitedly, Is this true? Your Majesty, please forgive my rudeness. I don't doubt you, but I really don't know what to say. Can you tell me more details? After more than 400 years of training, there were few things that could make these senior witches change their emotions so much. This was the first time Roland had seen Pasha lose her composure. Of course. But, thank you, Your Majesty. I'll tell everyone the good news now. However, before he could finish, Pasha disappeared from the top of the cave. Roland was stunned for a moment, and finally could only shake his head helplessly. When he entered the underground hall, not only Pasha, Aletheia, and Celine, but also all the remaining God's punishment witches had gathered in the center of the hall. They lined up in a straight line and waited expectantly for him to speak. This made it difficult for Roland to complete the second half of the sentence. Let nature take its course, Nightingale reminded him in a low voice. Or you can tell Pasha and the others privately through mind communication. That was the only way. He nodded, took a step forward, and began to tell them the general process and result of the last battle. Although the detailed statistical report had not been released and Leaf's report had many omissions, the data and gains and losses were not important to them. For these survivors who had been waiting for more than 4 centuries, victory was the most important thing. By the time he finished his report, the crowd was already in an uproar. Cheers rang out incessantly. Many witches burst into tears, but whether they were crying or laughing, they all expressed the same emotion. It was a kind of joy that broke free from the shackles after hundreds of years of silence. Please forgive me for my impoliteness and offense to you. Aletheia took the initiative to come to him and lowered her main tentacle. From today on, the united front is no longer necessary. You are the only ruler of Tequila, and our will lies in your hands. Pasha and Celine did not interrupt, which obviously meant that they agreed with her. This also meant that tequila would be an inseparable part of the Kingdom of Grey Castle in the future. After Roland nodded to show his acceptance, Alethea raised her main tentacle again. "There's one more thing I have to tell you." He concentrated and told the three witches about Elena. "Really? It's her," Pasha said slowly. To Roland's surprise, they didn't show much emotional fluctuations. "You already knew?" He could not help asking. "No, we just prepared for it," Alethea said frankly. "The ambush team was surrounded by the demons. If we were in the era of the Union, there would be no chance of survival. It's already a great fortune to be able to save everyone at such a price. You may not understand, but death is a common thing for us." Celine continued. "After all, everyone survived voluntarily through the fusion of the soul instrument and carrier. This process is equivalent to being screened by death, not to mention the heavy casualties we faced in the Battle of Divine Will. The only thing we are afraid of is a meaningless death. And Elena just made the choice that every tequila warrior will make," Alethea said at last. "So you don't have to worry about it." "So, I'm being comforted?" Roland felt a little emotional and did not know what to say. "Of course, this doesn't mean that we don't feel sad for the death of our companions. It's just that war has taught us restraint." Pasha looked at the witches who were still celebrating. "I'll tell them about this. But for now, let them enjoy the joy of victory." 5 days later, with the return of the frontline troops, the news of the victory of the Northern Expedition Army gradually spread in Neverwinter. Although it was not as shocking as the defeat of the demonic beasts or the Duke of Ryan, and it did not cause the whole city to celebrate, the people still gradually pieced together the real face of the enemy from the testimonies of their families and neighbors. The enemy was ferocious, powerful, and fearless, far beyond the demonic hybrids and the Duke's Knight Regiment. Coupled with the testimonies of the Devil Beast attack, the image of a powerful enemy that completely matched the demons of hell was gradually established. Some people even exaggerated the description of the demons as the legendary demons of disaster, which were hundreds of feet tall and could spit fire. It quickly became one of the hottest topics on the streets. Even such an enemy was still defeated by the First Army from thousands of miles away. This greatly inspired the people. If even the demons from hell could not compete with the army of Greycastle, who else could? At the same time, Greycastle Weekly began to publish the accounts of the frontline soldiers and the whole process of the war on a large page. For a time, the slogan of joining the First Army and expanding the territory for His Majesty swept the whole city. But the leaders of Neverwinter knew very well what the real challenge they were about to face was. The public cemetery in the west of the city. Since the first tombstone was laid during the months of demons 5 years ago, this wasteland, which was overgrown with weeds, had become a cemetery park covered with green grass. Today there were 426 new tombstones here. Most of them were empty, because the limited transport capacity was not enough to transport all the bodies back, but no one would feel that the victims were abandoned. The names on the tombstones recorded their honors and contributions. The tombstones of Ashes and Elena were also among them. They looked the same as other tombstones. The only difference was that there was a melted sword hilt in front of Ash's tombstone. "Salute," Iron Axe shouted, then raised his arm forcefully. All the leaders followed suit and saluted, even though their positions were higher than most of the soldiers. This was a memorial, but at the same time a warning. The fateful Battle of Divine Will was far from over. After the funeral, Roland immediately summoned Barav and said, "Summon all the ministers. I have a new task." Chapter 1173. The sound of the waves in the realm of mind gradually dissipated. Haxord opened his eyes. He saw a ring-shaped hall. Below him was a calm sea of fog, and above him was an endless sea of fog. 9 seats of different sizes were suspended in the air, forming a circle along the vertical stone wall. In the center of the circle stood a huge birth tower. However, unlike a real tower, it was covered with disorderly single eyes, each of which was the size of a primordial demon. This was the realm created by the king, the presiding Holy See. Although it was not the first time it had entered this place, its body still subconsciously felt oppressed and uneasy. Unlike simple spiritual communication, this virtual space opened up in the turbulence of the realm of mind was not a real illusion. If it fell into the sea of fog or was attacked, it would also suffer substantial damage. It would be fine as long as it did not wake up as if it was a dream. Unlike the chaos outside, this place was orderly and strict with rules. The king controlled everything in the presiding Holy See. This also meant that as long as it entered the presiding Holy See, its fate was in the hands of the king. However, its loyalty to the king was absolute. Instinctively resisting would not cause disgust. Only lowly beasts could not control their instincts. Thank you for your summon. The Sky Lord pays his respects to you. Hacksword bowed its head to the tower in the center of the hall. One of the eyes opened and glanced at Hacksword, then quickly closed again. Wait patiently. Yes. After a while, several figures appeared on the other seats. They looked a little blurry, but Hacksword could still identify them based on their characteristics. For example, the Bloody Conqueror, which had a body as large as a hill, and the Heart of Loathing, which had all sorts of weapons hanging from its armor, as well as the Heart of Loathing, which had a warped look in its clothes and mask. How vivid one's performance was dependent on one's understanding of the origin of magic, and there were only a few who could fully display themselves like this. When a figure appeared on the last seat, it meant that the 9 Grand Lords had gathered in the presiding Holy See. The image of the king, the birth tower that rose from the sea of fog, slowly opened half of its eyes. I believe you all know why I summoned you. Not only me, but everyone should have the same question. A few days ago, an ascendant came into contact with the realm of mind, and caused a ripple there. But soon after, there was no response. He paused and looked at the Sky Lord. And the owner of the ripples is called Osruk, who happens to be the commander of the vanguard of the Western Front, Hacksword. What happened in the West? As expected, the king had come for this question. Hacksword immediately felt the pressure on his body increase. To be able to cause fluctuations in the realm of mind meant that someone had crossed an extraordinary threshold. And this breakthrough would be sensed by all the Grand Lords. With the battle with the Sky Sea realm becoming increasingly intense, having an additional senior lord would bring a greater advantage to the race. However, the following turn of events caught everyone off guard. The senior lord had only left behind a mark before disappearing without a trace. It was the first time in centuries that a senior lord had perished right after his advancement. In fact, not long after Hacksword sensed the senior lord's breakthrough, he had received news of the defeat from the Western Front, along with a letter from Osruk. The contents of the letter made him want to cut open the head of this outstanding subordinate, to see what was wrong with this guy that made him act so recklessly. When the king asked, he instinctively wanted to hide the result of the battle on the Western Front, but his loyalty eventually made him tell the truth. Just as the Sky Lord had expected, there was a burst of doubt, surprise, and mockery in the hall. Ah, did I hear that right? The Blood Lord was the first to sneer. Your subordinate knew that he was no match for the enemy, but he still left all his troops on the fertile plains, and in the end, all of them died in the hands of those insects? I remember what you called him. The genius general? Hacksword was not surprised at all. As the main general of the battle against the Sky Sea realm, he had always been disdainful of the praise that Osruk received. If Osruk became a Grand Lord, his position would probably be the first to be affected. Now that there was a chance to attack Osruk, he naturally would not let it go. Forget about the primal demons and the tombstones. I think the Sky Lord knows how precious the horns are. Mask, who was in charge of cultivating the symbiotic demons, said in a strange voice. Mask, who was responsible for cultivating the symbiotic demons, said in a strange voice, if we can conquer Tequila, Meteor, and Arietta, we'll be fine. The God Stone mines there can at least replenish our current consumption. But without enough mines, we'll lose one of our horns. Losing to those insects is unimaginable. I think Your Excellency more or less has to bear some responsibility. What genius general? I think he's just SOSO. Ordinary ascendants can't open the gate of the 2 realms. Otherwise, there would be more than 9 of you sitting here, not to mention that the enemy has a transcendent. Why, it's not like it was 400 years ago. Do you still think that perishing together with a transcendent is a glorious thing? Listening to the discussion, Haxord's face darkened. Even if he did not understand Osruk's actions, he was still his former subordinate. Belittling a trusted general like this was no doubt an attack on him in disguise. This was not something that a Grand Lord could easily tolerate. At this moment, the king interrupted everyone's conversation. He did not ask them to shut up, but directly silenced them. Enough, I just want to know if this will affect your plan. Haxord quickly gathered his focus. Of course not. In the plan, I have made many preparations. It would be best if we can take down Tequila, but even if we can't, it won't affect the overall situation. Rest assured, King, we will set foot on the land of humans as scheduled. That sounds exactly like what you said. The king's tone finally eased a little. But the Sky Lord hesitated for a moment and decided to tell the king about the letter Osruk had written to him in advance. Perhaps it was the trust he had accumulated for hundreds of years, or the warning was so horrifying that it stuck in his throat. No matter what the reason was, Haxord felt a voice in his heart reminding him to speak. But this plan needs to be adjusted in terms of military strength. According to the commander of the Western Front, we need at least 10 times the number of soldiers to stabilize the war. 10 times. The Blood Conqueror growled. Are you kidding me? The Sky Sea realm is suppressing the front line, and you still want to take soldiers from me? I won't give you a single cent. Osruk, what did it say? The king asked in a deep voice. When it wrote this letter, the battle between the vanguard and the humans had not yet begun. It said that it insisted on staying in Tequila, because it discovered the opponent's vital weakness. If this plan succeeds, it will greatly weaken the opponent's strength. At that time, it will increase the number of soldiers by 10 times. If it leads, it will definitely destroy the humans. Is this a prophecy? Someone sneered. I wonder if it foresaw its own death. Haxord nodded after a moment of silence. It did mention it in the letter. The hall suddenly fell silent. The Grand Lords looked at each other, and the atmosphere suddenly became a little strange. The king broke the silence. What did it say? Chapter 1174. When he said that, the Holy See was in an uproar. Full power. The Bloodlord's tone was cold. What do you mean by full power? Literal meaning. Once he started, Haxord found himself relaxing. Give up the cities that have finished mining the Godstone mines. Give up most of the land to the Skysea realm. And then send all the troops to the Land of Dawn. Not 10 times the current plan, but all, including the existing and new ones, one after another, until the humans perish. Impudent. Is he crazy? Then where will the millions of people in the cities go? Although the letter didn't say, I think it should be the Fertile Plains. That place is wide enough to accommodate all the immigrants, the Sky Lord replied. This isn't ants moving. Mask was so angry that he laughed. If we can't move the birth tower, just moving them there is suicide. Besides, we only have one chance to erect a new tower after the bloody moon descends. It would be good if we can build it in Tequila, but the problem is that Your Excellency's genius general has already given up the Fertile Plains. Isn't it too late to talk about this now? It wasn't that he wanted to give up on Tequila, Haxord thought expressionlessly. The so-called second-hand preparation was just a helpless choice with limited military strength, and the one who rejected the request for reinforcements was the Supreme King. Of course, he would never object to Wang Xinqing because of this matter. This little bit of grumbling was just his instinct. That's right, instinct. If we consider this line of thought, it's not impossible. He paused. For example, using the deity of gods. Absolutely not. Bloodlord interrupted him before he could finish. That is our only hope to counterattack the Skysea realm. Using it to deal with the insects? Stop joking. The deity of gods is the core of the third battle of divine will, the king added. Every plan revolves around it. It's impossible to change course because of one person's judgment. Even if he's a newly promoted senior lord. There's no need to discuss this further. Since the king had made a decision, It meant that the matter was settled. Hacksword breathed a sigh of relief. In fact, even it felt that Osruk's words were too shocking. If not for the strange feeling in its heart, it would not have mentioned the contents of the letter in front of all the Grand Lords, especially the Blood Lords. No matter what, it had done its duty. Also, I think the request to increase the number of troops by 10 times is simply nonsense. Just as the bloody conqueror was about to follow up with another attack, someone suddenly interrupted him. I think we can't completely ignore Osruk's warning. The speaker's voice wasn't loud, but it left everyone stunned. It was the guardian of the capital, Silent Disaster. Even though it was a great Dark Lord, it rarely spoke in the Holy See Assembly. It was also a man of few words, just like its name suggested. At the same time, it was also one of the strongest great Dark Lords. Unlike Mask and Heart of Loathing, who were lacking in strength and had no choice but to use clothing to conceal their flaws, Silent Disaster was extremely pragmatic. Despite having evolved to a high level, it seemed to be clad in a pitch-black armor all day long. Even its head was covered tightly, as though it didn't care about its image or comfort. Reason? The king asked succinctly. In this world, there might be legacy shards that we don't know of. The hall was in an uproar once again. This sentence was even more shocking than Osruk's last words. How is that possible? There are a total of 4 fragments. Aren't they determined based on their shape? Do you also think that humans have upgraded through unknown means, so we need to deal with them with all our might? Where did you get this information from? Everyone questioned. No, I don't have any evidence, it's just my own guess. Silent Disaster said slowly. I once saw some incomprehensible scenes in the divine realm. Can you tell me? Half of the king's eyes looked at it. Silent Disaster shook its head. It's hard to describe with words. Please look into my memory, king and everyone. Then it lowered its head. Then, the king suddenly opened all its eyes. At that moment, Hacksword felt his body tremble. An extremely cold feeling drilled into his mind, and his body's resistance and rejection reached its peak. That was the discomfort caused by the forceful injection of consciousness. No, I'm absolutely loyal to the king. The Sky Lord forcibly suppressed its instinctive resistance and accepted the consciousness. Then a series of strange scenes appeared in front of it, which seemed to be a mixture of countless emotions of fear that could be reflected into the depths of its mind through its eyes, making it difficult to extricate itself. Amidst these images, Hacksword could vaguely see the figure of a human standing not far away, as if admiring Hacksword's struggle. Hacksword knew that these were not simple illusions. Black tentacles representing erosion were frantically attacking him. If he did not think of a way to escape, he would be devoured by the realm of mind. So it fled, and in its haste, it even broke a part of the throne's armrest. The next moment, Hacksword suddenly woke up from the other party's memory. In such a short period of time, it already felt a chill run down its back. And the other Grand Lords seemed to feel the same, and for a moment, the hall was filled with heavy panting sounds. At this point, everyone understood the meaning of Silent Disaster's words. It was common knowledge that there was a certain connection between the inheritance shards. When using the inheritance shards to communicate with other races, there was a price to be paid. Generally speaking, the party that had less involvement in the realm of mind would pay more. If it was a witch who appeared in the divine realm, it would not be strange at all. Actively exploring the realm of mind and inadvertently entering it were two completely different things. The latter could not be used as a measure of strength, especially for witches with all kinds of strange abilities. However, that figure was a male, and in the 1,000 years of records, there had never been any signs of a male human being able to use magic power. If it wasn't due to the upgrade, it was really hard to explain this phenomenon. At the same time, Hacksword also understood why the other party had waited until today to speak of this matter. To be frightened by a bug that could be crushed to death with a lift of his foot and flee from his throne, it was likely that anyone else would not mention it. It could not help but be curious. Would the face hidden under the pitch-black helmet blush? It seemed that wearing armor all day was not without its benefits. Wait. Speaking of which, Could it be that this was the reason why Silent Disaster requested the king to change the guardian? As expected, very soon, a Grand Lord looked at it. Your Excellency Firmament, could it be that you also? No, although I have entered the divine realm a few times, I did not see any phenomenon. Hacksword hurriedly said with its chest puffed out. If there was, I would definitely report it to the king immediately. Besides, with my understanding of the realm of mind, the situation might be reversed. After saying that, it felt a cold glare from Silent Disaster. Interesting. At this moment, a clear and melodious voice reached everyone's ears. Chapter 1175. Everyone's attention was focused on the person who spoke. Hacksword was no exception. The Nightmare Lord, Valkyries, could be considered the most special of all the lords. She had been promoted very early, so much so that most of the people present had been under her care. During the first battle of Divine Will, she was also the one who had the closest relationship with the humans, and it was even rumored that there were still believers in some cities. Although her individual combat ability was not the strongest, it was enough to evolve completely. However, she maintained her appearance after her first promotion: green skin, horns on her head, and a vertical third eye in the middle of her forehead. If you had to say that she did not look like a human, her dressing, speech, and behavior were distinctly human. She was also one of the first lords to master the human language. This was basically the polar opposite of Silent Disaster. This could be seen from the Nightmare Lord's thin and delicate white robe. In order to show off her appearance, even the fine threads on her robe were clearly visible, and she looked completely different from the blurry figures of the Blood Conqueror and the others. To be able to spend so much energy on such an unimportant thing and still look so relaxed, it was enough to show her mastery of the realm of mind. If she had been the one scared away, Hacksword would not have said a word. In fact, she was the only lord that the Sky Lord could not see through. If it were someone else, he would have marked them as disloyal by closing his eyes in the presiding Holy See. More importantly, the king did not seem to have any opinion on this. Oh, what did you discover? I just thought of a possibility. Valkyries slightly straightened her body. Regardless of whether there really is a way to promote that we do not understand, assuming that this male has the same ability as the witches, then this ability must be related to the realm of mind, and the degree of involvement is not small. Otherwise, with Her Excellency Silent Disaster's ability, she would not have been suppressed to such an extent. The red light under the Silent Disaster's helmet flickered. I have been guarding the legacy shard for nearly 200 years, and I have seen more than one human, but most of them ended up escaping or being devoured. In the past 200 years, there has only been one person who can look at me as an equal, and it was only 1 or 2 years ago, but she was a female. The words of the witch are not surprising. What I'm trying to say is that it doesn't matter whether the person is male or female. What matters is the ability itself. Perhaps he didn't even realize it himself, but this degree of involvement was enough to leave a mark in the realm of mind. If it's just based on the results, I agree with your judgment. Hacksword seized the opportunity to speak. After all, this was its area of expertise. But what's the point? The realm of mind is even more vast than the ocean. It's almost impossible to find these traces. Maybe. Valkyries could not deny it. But I still want to give it a try. By using the connection between the legacy shards, it might not be hopeless. What do you think? It could not help but be stunned. You can already sense the connection between the fragments? The inheritance they received from the underground civilization had greatly improved their ability to use mana, including the resonance of the Birth Tower. At the same time, they also realized that whether it was through the Birth Tower or through the Legacy Shard, it was all done through the realm of mind. Therefore, in theory, as long as they started searching from one end, they would always be able to find the other end. But this was only in theory. The realm of mind was full of chaos and disorder. It was like an ocean full of whirlpools. Trying to find a thin thread hidden under the surface of the sea was very difficult. Besides, the deeper they went, the more they would be affected by the turbulence of the realm of mind. They would need to use all their strength just to maintain themselves, not to mention trying to find the faintly discernible connection. It had never thought of such a method. Could it be that the other party's understanding of the origin of magic had already surpassed its own level? Probably, Valkyrie said unhurriedly. But we won't know until we try. If we can come into contact with the traces left behind by the other party, we might be able to find out the answer we want to know. No, even if we find it, it won't be of much use, Hacksword thought to itself. The realm of mind was too complicated. Even those of the same race who had ascended needed a lot of searching, feeling, and guessing to find the truth, not to mention those of a different race. If they tried to understand it by force, they would only fall into confusion and madness. He wanted to say this, but when he saw the other party's pure white robe, he swallowed his words. That might be the case for others, but for the Nightmare Lord, it wasn't so sure. The legacy shard is now under the care of the Sky Lord. If you want to try, go find him, the king said. Yes. Valkyrie put her hand on her chest. But there are too many uncertainties in this idea, and the time it will take is immeasurable. If human beings really find a new way to ascend, it's very likely that irreparable losses will be caused before we know the answer. If I understand correctly, His Excellency the Sky Lord is prepared for two things. After losing Tequila, there's only one option left, right? If there's another problem, won't 400 years of preparation go down the drain? You worry too much. Blood Conqueror said in a muffled voice. I was the one who presided over Osruk's ascension ceremony. After he became an ascended, he learned a lot about human beings from me. Valkyrie closed her eyes and rested again. His talent was fully revealed during the learning period. I don't think his warning is groundless. As for the proposal to send more troops, I support it. Me too, Silent Disaster echoed. The king was silent for a moment and looked at the frontline commanders. Without affecting the entire defense line, is it possible to send 10 times the planned number of troops to reinforce the Sky Lord? King, I'm only asking if there is or not. There was a brief silence in the hall. To Hacksword's surprise, after a while, Mask spoke first. Yes, King, I can do it. As long as you invest enough resources in my research, I can cultivate more powerful and diverse symbiotic demons. Their growth cycle is not limited by their mother, and their individual combat ability is far above that of the primordial demons. It's not impossible to send 10 times the troops. More importantly, they won't affect the front line at all. But that will consume a lot of godstones, the Heart of Abhorrence said worriedly. If we don't control them well, it's no different from destroying our own foundation. As long as we can crush those bugs, we can make up for the losses. Are you sure you can keep up with the schedule? Blood Conqueror said grumpily. Mask paused for a moment. Of course, it's difficult to provide 10 times the number of symbiotic demons at one time, but the bugs may not react so quickly. If we can destroy them with 5 times the number, we can save half of the resources. Besides, it's better to provide them in batches than none. All right. The king interrupted the conversation. Then let's go with this plan for the time being. In any case, we can't let the humans in the Land of Dawn live for another 400 years. In this battle of divine will, we must conquer the entire continent. That you're tuning in to the Limei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.